meeting. I'm Megan Marshall, the Executive Officer here at the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, and I have the pleasure of opening our meeting today. Thank you for your commitment in joining our efforts to end and prevent homelessness in California and for joining our meeting. A few reminders before we begin. This is a 3-hour meeting, and while we will do our best to keep this time frame, there's a possibility we may go over that timing slightly. Prior to this meeting, council members were provided a briefing packet, which also is available to the public on our website. We will try to leave some time for council members to ask general questions towards the end of the meeting, but if we run out of time, please feel free to reach out to the Cal ICH staff with any questions after the meeting. With that, we'll review our agenda. All right, so we'll begin as we always do with a call to order, our tribal land acknowledgement and roll call, a review of our consent calendar, and just as a reminder, if you did not attend the September 7th meeting, please abstain from voting on that item. We'll then move to council co-chair opening remarks. I'll provide my executive officer updates, some very exciting presentations for you all today, including the introduction of our Lived Experience Advisory Board members, a presentation from our State Funding and Programs Working Group, and a very robust, we're hoping, discussion on the action plan report and planning. We'll close, of course, with general public comments and final remarks before we adjourn. And with that, I will, during today's meeting, there will be an opportunity for general public comment as noted, but we'll allow for a maximum of 2 minutes for each comment. We welcome all public comments and feedback. However, due to the structure of the public meeting we're in, we may not be able to respond to them. For this reason, if you have any specific questions that you would like answered, we ask you to please email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov. With that, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness is hereby called to order on this day, November 30th, 2023 at 1:05 p.m., which I think might be a record for us. So with that, I will now pass it to Cal ICH staff member Vivila Blossman-Baird to read the tribal land acknowledgement. Vivila.
Thank you, Megan. We wish to acknowledge that Sacramento is the unceded homeland of the Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, the Nisinan people, the Patwin Wintun people, and members of the Wilton Rancheria tribe, who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. We extend our gratitude to the ancestors of all California Native American tribes and their descendants, as we recognize that wherever we are joining from in our virtual community, we are all on California Native American lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivila. Will Cal ICH staff member Claire Bannerman please call the roll?
Absolutely. This is the attendance roll call for the council. We need a majority of members or a quorum to officially start and hold this meeting. Council members, after I call your name, please say present or here. Apologies if I mispronounce any names. Dr. Mark Galley.
Janine, present.
Thank you. Taddy Gawa.
Present.
Thank you. Tomas Aragon.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Bass.
Present.
Thank you. Elisa Becerra.
Present.
Thank you. Stephanie Clendenin.
Present.
Thank you. Susan Damaris.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra Hamame.
Present.
Thank you. Ricky Hammett.
Here.
Thank you. Kim Johnson.
Present.
Thank you. Gail Tatiama.
Present.
Thank you. Veronica Lewis.
Present.
Thank you. Jeff McCumber. Okay. Susanna Parsons.
Present.
Thank you. Rebecca Rowan O'Shaughnessy.
Present.
Thank you. Lindsay Sin.
Present.
Thank you. Gustavo Velasquez.
Present.
Thank you. Nancy Ward.
Present.
and Anna Acton.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum, and I will move us on to our next agenda item. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So agenda item 2 is the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for regular or non-controversial items that need to be approved by the council via a vote. We do not expect discussion from members. However, that said, the council may engage in discussion on any item on the consent calendar if they so choose. We have one item, the adoption of the September 7th council meeting summary. Are there any comments from council members? Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, we will move on to public comments. Okay, so before proceeding, since this is an action item that will result in a vote, we now open it up for public comment. Please keep comments to items on the consent calendar only. If your comments are not related to the consent calendar, there will be time for public comment at the end of this meeting. If you are connected through Zoom, select the raised hand icon in the meeting window on your computer, and we will unmute your audio to allow for comment. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. Once I call on you to speak, you'll be instructed to unmute yourself, and you will have 2 minutes to make your comment, and I will check for any raised hands. I'll give it a second. Okay. So there are no comments. Would anyone like to motion to approve the meeting summary?
Claire, just to jump in really quickly, sorry, I just wanted to note that Carmina Barales is also in attendance for the Department of Education.
Oh, sorry, Carmina.
This is Councilmember Lewis. I'll move to approve the meeting summary.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Does anyone second?
I'll second.
Is that Nancy? Thank you, Nancy. Okay, we have a motion to adopt from Councilmember Veronica Lewis and a second from Councilmember Nancy Ward. I will roll call for a vote. As I call your name, please say aye or yes, or you may also abstain or vote no. I will be calling the names of those eligible to vote only. Dr. Mark Galley.
Aye.
Tomas Aragon.
Aye.
Michelle Bass.
Wasn't present at that meeting.
Abstain. Okay, thank you. Stephanie Clendenin.
Aye.
Susan Damaris.
Aye.
Kim Johnson.
Aye.
Gail Tatiyama.
Aye.
Veronica Lewis.
Aye.
Jeff McCumber.
Aye.
Rebecca Rowan O'Shaughnessy.
Aye.
Lindsay Sin.
Aye.
Gustavo Velasquez.
Aye.
Nancy Ward.
Aye.
Anna Acton.
Aye on behalf of Joe.
Thank you. The motion passes. The meeting summary is approved, and I will turn it over to Cody Ziegert to facilitate the next item.
Great, thank you, Claire, and thanks to everyone again for joining us today. So I'm going to start and quickly pass it off, hand it over to our co-chairs for their opening remarks. So Dr. Galley, will you please start us off today?
Thank you to the ICH staff and to all of the council members. Appreciate some time with you today. And let me just first start by acknowledging that we have Tad with us for this meeting as the acting secretary. Tad, thank you for being part of this conversation. A lot has changed at BCSH over the last many weeks. The very incredible, thoughtful, committed Lourdes Castro Ramirez has left to important work in Los Angeles. Tad took the helm, and now just a couple days ago, our own council member, Tamika Moss, was appointed by the governor as the new BCSH secretary. I am personally excited about that appointment. I think Tamika brings not just a lot of amazing vision and chops to get work done, but just a deep commitment to all of what ICH has been thinking through and will be pushing forward in the future. To imagine her as co-chair is a really wonderful addition, and we don't miss a beat because she played such an important role with Veronica Lewis as our community members on the council. So I know you all join me in appreciating her appointment, looking forward to her contribution in the work together. Also, just take a moment to acknowledge that this is Michelle Boss's first meeting, the director of the Department of Healthcare Services. The move of J.C. Cooper from a state level to a federal level position gives us the great opportunity to engage with Michelle in this council now. So thanks, Michelle, for joining. Just a couple of other points. I think I'm looking forward to today's agenda. Reading the bios of those on our Lived Experience Advisory Board is both really important for all of us to do, understand who we're talking to, what their experiences are, and in many of them, the word resilience comes up. And this idea that our lived experience board comes to us with an incredible degree of resilience and passion and commitment, and that experience is going to guide our way. I think we at the state level, and frankly at almost every level of policy making, program oversight, really learn so much from engaging and talking to those who some of the programs we have the privilege of working on end up serving, but more importantly, to really start to tweak them, to move them, to change directions, to think about them differently. So I'm looking forward to the start of this board's impact on our work moving forward. And then secondly, the presentation by Susan DeMorris around the work of Cal ICH and how it dovetails, intersects with, brings to life some of the really important work as part of the master plan for aging that Susan has been building on for a number of years under this administration. I think that's going to be terrific. And then by way of a sort of programmatic update, we're a couple of months in now to the CARE pathway being launched in 7 counties. I would say that we are where we want to be. We know that we have some referrals, petitions, but not an overwhelming number, that counties that are participating early are getting involved and doing some really interesting things. Corinne Buchanan's had a chance to visit a couple of the counties, heard the stories of how the opportunities to build partnerships with Cal ICH is primarily about building these partnerships and connections. That's happening because of this program. And some of the interesting things that a smaller county like Tuolumne is using the funding to acquire new facilities, build new units, giving people a chance to move from the outside spaces to indoors, and hopefully a stabilizing force. So look forward to continuing to give this body updates on how CARE is progressing, but we're getting started. It's moving, and I'm excited with the launch of Los Angeles in the next day and weeks to see how that program takes fold in such a big and important county to California. So with that, Cody, I'll turn it back to you. Look forward to hearing from Tad as well, but thanks for a few minutes of updates and welcomes.
Great, thanks, Dr. Gelly. And yeah, as he mentioned, we are today also joined by BCSH Acting Secretary Tad Igawa, who will provide remarks next, so you can take it away.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Galley, and thank you, Cody. And welcome everyone to this quarter's California Interagency Council on Homelessness meeting. As has already been mentioned, my name is Tad Igawa, I am the acting secretary of the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, but not for too much longer. As has been mentioned, Governor Newsom recently appointed Tamika Moss as secretary of the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, so I will soon have a new boss. Her leadership in the fields of housing and homelessness, public policy, and community development will be a great asset to us all. I'd also like to say it's so great to see so many state agencies here today, and to all of the community partners, service providers, local leaders, advocates, and individuals joining us today, simply thank you. This critical issue needs all of us engaged as we develop a system that prevents and ends homelessness. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to either Cody or Megan for some updates.
Thank you, Tad. I'm okay to take it from here, Cody. A few updates for me. Really just one important reiteration of a point made by Dr. Galley. I'd like to, again, ask that you join me in welcoming DHCS Director Michelle Bass, who's officially joined the council, and as was said, is assuming J.C. Cooper's former position. So welcome, Director Bass. My team and I look forward to deepening our partnership with DHCS. And on a personal note, having served nearly 20 years in county government, I can't underscore enough the importance of DHCS's role in addressing our homeless crisis. A few seasonal announcements and reminders. As some of you are aware, the Interdepartmental Disaster Preparedness Group, which is a mouthful and does not have an acronym as of today, is also meeting in person next week to begin development of a toolkit for local jurisdictions intended to share best practices, provide resources, lift up lessons learned, and bring information to communities that can be used to update local emergency management plans to integrate persons experiencing homelessness into the response and recovery phase, I should say. This group will be focused on preparedness and providing resources to local jurisdictions, which for us means our cities, our counties, and our continuums of care in preparation for emergency and disaster response to support local coordination and integrate persons experiencing homelessness into those plannings, responses, and recoveries. And that includes times of inclement weather. Participants in that group include representatives from our colleagues at Cal HHS, of course, staff at Cal ICH, CDPH, CDSS, Cal OES, and Caltrans. This is intended to be a complement to the Priority Populations Task Force. And before I make my final comment, I just would like to remind folks that many communities across California are preparing for their point-in-time counts of their unsheltered residents. These counts are only made possible by the many volunteers who deploy out to survey persons experiencing homelessness. As we at Cal ICH have staff across the state, I'm asking my team to connect with their respective COCs to volunteer in this important activity. I'll be participating in Sacramento's count. Sakshika Wickrama will be volunteering in Los Angeles's. And I'll also be sending an email out to each of our council member departments and agencies to encourage their staff to participate in their community's point-in-time counts. Lastly, before I turn it back over to Cody to formally introduce our next agenda item, the Lived Experience Advisory Board, I'd like to say how incredibly proud I am of the work the Cal ICH team has done to actualize this important body. I will also use this as an opportunity to remind council members that the services of the lead of the advisory board are available to your respective departments and agencies should you need persons with lived experience to inform your specialized work. I have the pleasure of serving on Cal HHS's Behavioral Health Task Force. I've made very well known to them that we have a lead who is ready to serve in whatever capacity their expertise could allow for. So with that, please continue on with our agenda, Cody.
Great, thanks, Megan. All right, so I am just thrilled to get to kick off this agenda item where we will be introducing members of our newly formed Lived Experience Advisory Board, or LEAB. And I will pass it off to my colleague Courtney in just a moment. But before we begin, I wanted to remind our council members and the public, right, where the LEAB is situated in our overall council structure. I will move through this quickly as I don't want to take time away from our LEAB members who have joined us today, but we included all these slides so that you can look at them after our meeting and follow up with any questions or clarifications that you may have.
Cody, I'm
Yeah.
sorry if I can just,
No.
looks like Gustavo just had his hand raised. I'm not sure if that was intentional before we proceed.
I just wanted to take a moment after Ms. Marshall's comments to bring to all of the council members' attention the fact that a few days ago, Governor Newsom at a press conference did an update of the Encampment Resolution Grants Program. And I just wanted to say for those that did not watch it, Ms. Marshall and also Ms. Becerra, who is at this meeting, did a great job with the governor explaining the progress of this program. The governor seemed engaged, impressed about the progress that this program is making. So I just wanted to congratulate on behalf of all the members of the council, the staff of ICH for moving the ball on the encampment resolution grants. And again, it was just a great job by both Ms. Becerra and Ms. Marshall to be with the governor. And it's also great to see that people that actually execute these programs, live and breathe these programs, were actually with the governor, explaining to the press and the public what is being, accomplished with this program. So kudos to both Ms. Marshall and Ms. Becerra for that.
Thank you, Director Velasquez. Very much appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And apologies that I missed your hand. I'm going to keep track of the hands more closely in this next item. But yeah, so we will, as I said, I'm going to speak very quickly and then pass it off to our team to introduce the lead. So on the next slide, you'll see sort of, as you know, right, CalICH as an interagency council is supported by a number of other groups and structures in your work to prevent and end homelessness. Please don't feel the need to read all of this on this slide. But our staff have put together these slides in an attempt to sort of illustrate and summarize the work and responsibilities of these various groups and to make clear sort of how they relate to one another. So on this slide, what you're looking at is that we're trying to make clear that CalICH can refer both to the Interagency Council, you all here today, as well as the CalICH staff of around 50 people housed within BCSH. This can be a little confusing, so we just wanted to make this distinction between the two up front. And as you know, the Interagency Council is made up of members from 18 different state departments and agencies, as well as 2 community members, with really the goal of developing policies and identifying resources, benefits, and services to prevent and end homelessness in California. The Interagency Council meets quarterly, is organized around the work in the action plan, and is supported by a number of groups such as the Advisory Committee, the Interagency Working Groups, and the LEAB, who you're going to meet today. CalICH staff, on the other hand, handle a variety of day-to-day operations of this work and is split into multiple teams focused on statewide policy, local initiatives, research, our homeless data integration system, and our grant support and development. CalICH staff, again, report through BCSH and work on many projects not directly overseen by the Interagency Council, just like any other council member, department, or agency. So I'm going to focus the rest of my comments here on the next slide, as it illustrates sort of the relationships between these various groups that support the Interagency Council. So on this slide, you're seeing sort of a rough approximation of the relationships between these groups, right? We have the Interagency Council, the Advisory Committee, the LEAB, and the working groups. These solid black arrows are indicating the relationship between you all, the Interagency Council, and the Advisory Committee, the LEAB, and the working groups. The Advisory Committee and LEAB are really meant to provide guidance and recommendations to inform the Interagency Council. Their guidance is used to inform council decision-making and, when applicable, department and agency level implementation. The working groups are created and led by CalICH staff with the goal of implementing council priorities that cut across multiple departments. So things like racial equity or youth homelessness are things that we all are working on, and so we want to coordinate those in those working groups. The council can, ask these groups to work on projects or request specific feedback, as you'll have an example of later in this agenda. And so that's sort of the relationship there. And then separately, the dotted gray arrows sort of indicate the relationship between these 3 groups, right? The Advisory Committee, LEAB, and working groups can engage with one another on specific issues that intersect across their groups. They may choose to co-create recommendations or create drafts and share them with one another before sending to you all. And this actually happened with the recommendations you will hear about today. So the next 3 slides provide more in-depth information about these groups. I'm not going to go over all of them right now because I want to get to this agenda item, but please feel free to look at them after the meeting, as I said. So yeah, this slide goes into more depth about what the specific responsibilities each group has. I'm going to focus on the one that discusses the LEAB right now, as it's most relevant to today's agenda item. The LEAB includes individuals with a variety of experiences of homelessness. They help create guidance to inform council decisions, provide input on interagency policies, and help address questions or tasks, posed by the council or its member departments or agencies. So you'll see similar descriptions for the other groups here as well. And as Megan said earlier, right, these groups can be a resource to individual departments and agencies as it's relevant as well. So the next slide goes over our council recommendation process, how our council receives recommendations from these various groups. We actually went over these at the last council meeting as it related to the advisory committee's recommendations. So I'm not going to go over them again today, but they are here for you to review. And the last slide gets into examples of which aspects of state policymaking the Interagency Council has purview over. These actually all come from the Interagency Council's goals outlined in statute. So just briefly to go over them, right, this includes coordinating funding, communicating about the council's vision, using and disseminating data to inform decisions, creating guidance, toolkits, and materials for use by our stakeholders, engaging partners in this work, such as researchers or other experts, amplifying best practices and innovations in our work, recommending technical assistance to support our stakeholders, and providing policy and procedural recommendations to legislators or other governmental entities. So I'm going to stop here and let us get to the more exciting part of the agenda item, but just hope this is helpful as sort of like a refresher to remind us where the LEAB fits into our overall work as an interagency council. And with that, I will pass it to Courtney.
Thank you, Cody. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Courtney Tacker, and I'm the Director of Local Initiatives here at CalICH. The focus of the Local Initiatives team is to strengthen partnerships and enable connections through the delivery of resources and information, the amplification of best practices, and acting as a conduit for communication across systems to support local communities in preventing and ending homelessness. Our team has also had the privilege of supporting the work of on the CalICH side to establish CalICH's Lived Experience Advisory Board in coordination with our contracted vendor Homebase, who is supporting the implementation and facilitation of the inaugural CalICH LEAB. Next slide, please. I am here today to provide a bit of background on the purpose of the CalICH LEAB, an overview of the recruitment process and selection of members, and I will then turn it over to our partner, Nicole Thomas from Homebase, to facilitate introductions of our members to the council. We are very fortunate that these individuals are giving us their time and expertise, and I would just like to start off by extending a sincere thank you to each of our LEAB members for saying yes and for their interest and willingness in serving on the CalICH LEAB, and we thank you for your partnership. Next slide, please. One of the 6 key principles and commitments of CalICH is to ensure that decisions are deeply informed and guided by people who have expertise grounded in lived experiences of homelessness. In the shared work of the council, centering the voices of people with lived experiences of homelessness is vital in informing the state's response to homelessness. In support of this, last year, CalICH staff presented on the importance of authentically engaging individuals with lived expertise of homelessness in shared state work. And there was agreement among council members that deepening interagency work around engaging the expertise of people with lived experience should be highlighted as a priority. To operationalize this, CalICH staff decided to form the Lived Experience Advisory Board that I'm here to introduce to you today. The LEAB will inform a broad range of considerations and decisions of the council and member departments. This will include providing guidance and recommendations on topics going to the council for council discussion and decision-making, and may include providing recommendations on questions identified by the council, advisory committee, or other CalICH working group, providing input on specific state programs or topics, helping to guide and assess the implementation of activities throughout the action plan for preventing and ending homelessness, and encouraging communities to further center the voices of people with lived experiences of homelessness within their local planning and decision-making, among other activities. CalICH LEAB members will also collaboratively identify their own agenda items for discussion and will be determining their priorities over the next few months. Researching and planning for the CalICH LEAB began in spring of 2021. To coordinate leave development, CalICH staff communicated with several leaves throughout the state to analyze and determine key elements and approaches to implementation. Staff also reviewed guidance and best practices issued through federal partners, including USICH and HUD, for the formation of this leave. To ensure expert knowledge and subject matter expertise and to promote leave independence and autonomy, it was determined that a contract for leave implementation and facilitation services was necessary. Through a request for proposals, a contract with Homebase was awarded and executed in December of last year, with recruitment for the CalICH leave beginning in July of 2023 and closing 1 month later on August 11th, 2023. Next slide, please. CalICH sought a diverse pool of applicants for the leave, representing different demographic groups and geographical locations across the state of California, to ensure membership is representative of the diverse populations of individuals experiencing homelessness in California. CalICH used many recruitment methods, including announcement and distribution of marketing materials through CalICH grantees, continuums of care, counties, cities, and tribal grantees, and to our council member departments who distributed and shared across their stakeholder groups, as well as the utilization of social media outreach, among others. During the recruitment period, CalICH received an outstanding 320 applications for 11 positions, with representation across 42 counties in California. The robust response, we believe, was a testament to the support of our grantees, continuums of care, counties, and cities across California, who aided in the dissemination of the recruitment materials broadly across the state and throughout their networks and providers to support us in reaching those with deep expertise across California. To determine if recruitment efforts reached a diverse pool of applicants across the state, applicants were provided an optional and anonymous demographic survey that was completed by 216 of the 320 applicants. The data received from the demographic survey indicated that outreach efforts were very successful, with strong representation of diverse identities and experiences, including representation from smaller rural communities. Upon meeting the threshold criteria identified on the screen, applications were then scored on 3 criteria, including demonstration of diverse skills, perspectives, and ideas that would support the work of the leave, priorities indicating thoughtful consideration of the topics impacting homelessness, and a commitment to using current or past experience for homelessness advocacy work. Next slide, please. Of the 320 applicants, 55 individuals were offered interviews. The 55 individuals interviewed included representation across 36 counties, with larger counties receiving multiple interview seats. Interviewees were asked a total of 5 questions by representatives of Homebase and CalICH, and those interviews were scored on the criteria presented on the screen. After the completion of interviews, a total of 11 members were offered seats on the leave. And I do want to take a quick moment to say that we were truly overwhelmed by the interest and response from so many applicants with deep expertise, and extend our sincere thanks for the time and energy many put into this application process. Next slide, please. The final leave membership has representation from 9 counties and 1 tribal nation in California, with close to equally split representation across urban, suburban, and rural locations. A full listing of this representation is included on the slide. Recruitment resulted in a diverse applicant pool, and therefore the leave has diverse experiences and expertise with strong representation across age groups, spanning from youth and young adults to members who are 65 and older. There is representation from various communities of color, multiple identities within the LGBTQIA+ community, and diverse experiences with various systems as well. Membership includes members who are currently experiencing homelessness, alongside individuals who have been successfully housed and individuals who are now service providers within systems of care. The leave will meet monthly and will be reimbursed for their participation. Next slide, please. The leave recently completed a 3-part onboarding series and will hold their first official meeting on December 21st. CalICH has also released a request for proposals to procure a vendor to provide technology equipment and support to members that do not have sufficient technology access to ensure equitable participation for all members. This RFP is currently posted and closes on December 13th, so we are hopeful to award and move into contract for those services in the near future. We are also working on a coordination and communication pathways document to assist in identifying agenda items from council, member departments, and other CalICH groups, support coordination across the LEAB advisory committee and working groups within CalICH, and share LEAB input and recommendations along with the outcome of those recommendations, which we will be presenting to the LEAB for their input and finalization over the next few meetings. CalICH has also been in coordination with other state departments that are establishing advisory bodies of individuals with lived experience, and will continue coordination with our member departments as we all collectively move forward. Next slide, please. So I'm very excited to now turn it over to Nicole Thomas, home-based senior policy analyst and project management lead for the CalICH LEAB, who is going to introduce the CalICH LEAB members.
Thanks, Courtney. So as Courtney noted, we are so excited that a number of our LEAB members are able to attend today and introduce themselves directly. So we're going to be going in alphabetic order of the LEAB, and they're going to have approximately a minute to introduce themselves, and I'll be calling on each of our LEAB members. And for LEAB members who aren't present today, I'll be reading some speaker bio highlights from them, but we really encourage you to learn more about them and read their full speaker bios on the CalICH website. But we will start with Annalee. If you want to come off of mute.
Good afternoon. My name is Annalee Trujillo. I'm from the Paula Band Mission Indians in Southern California. We have Paula Housing Resource Center, which was newly established about a year ago. And our goal is to provide training, technical assistance, and also advocacy for our local tribes and tribes throughout the state of California. We've been working closely with a lot of partners so we can provide equitable and housing services for tribes throughout California. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annalee. I'm going to be reading out some highlights from another LEAB member, Audrey Pearson. So AP is currently a team lead case manager in South Los Angeles at the Homeless Outreach Agency. And in her 6-year tenure, Audrey continues to be a trailblazer and an innovative outreach worker who utilizes her lived experience and assets to approach her daily tasks as a beacon of light for the unhoused population. And since moving to LA in 2017, AP has dedicated her time to helping end homelessness through housing vulnerable subpopulations. She prides herself in her zeal and intentionality to help heal and be a catalyst for change, supporting those experiencing a lack of resources as they navigate systemic hurdles. I'm also going to introduce Caressa Smith, who's representing Lake County. So Caressa has served as the case manager at Hope Center before being promoted to a program manager. And she often speaks on the power of second chances, having grown up surrounded by addiction and the wreckage it causes, but also really seeing the power of recovery. And Caressa is passionate about helping people overcome barriers to living their best life. And Caressa is motivated to become a licensed clinical social worker. A few more I'm going to be reading out, and then we're going to be handing it over. Danielle is on the call, but has asked me to read it out. So Danielle Francisco is representing Monterey. Danielle is passionate about working with vulnerable populations. She currently works as a youth with lived experience coordinated assessment and referral system coordinator for the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers, where she has been a really significant partner in redesigning their Youth Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool, so the VI-SPDAT. And she also serves as a youth action member advocating for youth and young adults to improve systems and service delivery. And we have Jaylene Sanchez from San Diego County. Jaylene experienced homelessness during her first year of college, but it did not stop her from continuing her education. Her current position is as an advocacy program manager at San Diego Housing Federation, which is a nonprofit that is focused on advocacy and increasing affordable housing and homeless policy solutions. She manages 2 programs, the Homeless Experienced Advocacy and Leadership Network and the Residents United Network. And now I'm going to pass it over to Marjorie. Marjorie, do you want to come off mute?
Is this my turn?
Correct.
Good afternoon. Let me see if I can turn on my camera here. My phone's been giving me. There we go. Can you see me? Hi, I'm Marjorie Biza. I'm in the Northern California area, Sacramento, California. I am a person currently who is unhoused and have this lived experience, and I'm living it. What am I looking forward to contributing to the work is my lived experience, but also my expertise in some other areas that can inform our work. And what am I hoping to get? I'm hoping to get the benefit of the experiences of others that will help me better do what I'm doing and become a better version of myself so that I can contribute more, be blessed, and be a blessing.
Thank you so much, Marjorie.
You're welcome.
We also have Mary Maldonado, who's representing Kings County. So Mary currently lives in an encampment community in Hanford. She's proud of the way her community takes care of itself, keeps the encampment clean, really sticks by one another. And her work and desire to join Cal ICH LEAB is inspired by her own lived experience and by the lives of people around her. And she really sees an urgent need for resources and funding to help people find places to live inside, but also to protect those who are forced to live outside. She wants to work for dignity, respect, and basic needs like water, food, and safe places to be for people who are living in encampments. Next, we'll go to Melanie. Do you want to come off of mute?
Sure. I'm never nervous, and this was a different experience for me. Thank you all for having me. My name is Melanie Robledo. I am the housing project manager for the largest national reentry organization. We have 9 sites here in California. I am based out of the LA office, but I also live in the city of Riverside, so I also work in that office half of my time. I actually became engaged with this organization while I myself was incarcerated. I never got a crime that took me to state prison. Most of my arrests, or all of my arrests, were while I was homeless, experiencing homelessness. And a lot of them describe a different picture of the person who I am today. It was clear as day that I was suffering from a lot of mental health issues that were heightened by my need for addiction. And when I say my need for addiction, if you get a chance to really know what I've gone through, you'll understand about the sexual trauma and the need to stay vigilant while you're out on the streets. What I hope to gain in here is to continue to instill hope for others and help them create change. It didn't happen overnight for me. It took time and it took a lot of different layers, but I have a really good landscape of how those layers look and what they can look like to be successful. And one of the other things that I really enjoy doing in this space is being able to tell my story, to give people a different perspective and an insight on what it's truly like to be homeless and what it's like to have people make initiatives for you or based on their idea of what homeless looks like. So, and I really hope to be able to provide that critical insight to everyone.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Next, we have Monique. Monique, are you able to come off of mute and introduce yourself?
Hi, folks. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm sorry, folks. I'm taking
Yes,
the
we
time to
can.
go. Good. I'm out on the field, but always happy to be in this space. Let me pull up the... So hi, everyone. My name is Monique Guerra. I'm with Riverside County Continuum of Care under Housing and Workforce Solutions Department. And a little bit that I want to share about my background with everyone is I am an older sister to 2 siblings, so most of my life has been around making sure that they don't experience homelessness and that they get the education that, you know, they're more than capable of, you know, getting. I think it's just changing that stigma for them of what the world looks like for folks that, you know, come from homelessness, poverty, and addiction. And so letting them know that they're more than their circumstance has been one of my biggest things in life. And now I'm a homeless youth coordinator. So making sure that our system is working for the youth in our community. But also just being able to really connect with the youth that are currently experiencing homelessness, and really sharing that hope, those resources, and what it means to be someone with lived experience, and how to kind of honor that and use that to to share with the world what wisdom you have. And so really just rephrasing what that lived experience looks like. And so what I'm hoping to accomplish is to just really share ideas and information with everyone, but also kind of learn from each and every one of you, how you all support your community and your role, but how do you continue to heal from all of the trauma, right, that we've all endured. And so how do you continue to work in your role and work through that while still trying to help folks, right? And then what do you do in those triggering moments, and in those moments when you have burnout, or you just don't see systemic change? And so I'm hoping to just also be an asset and a resource. So thank you everyone so much.
Thank you so much, Monique. Next we have Pixie.
Hey everyone, I'm Pixie Popwell. I use they, them pronouns. I'm in Solano County, but I also sit as the vice president on the Sacramento Continuum of Care Advisory Board. I am the director of the California Homeless Youth Project, which is an initiative that lives within the California Research Bureau. I have lived experience as a young adult in college due to being queer and not working for other folks around me. And then even again, multiple times, and then after being a homeowner, thinking that, okay, here we go. I really want to highlight that housing stability doesn't feel like, it feels like an illusion. So really being able to ensure that rename what success is, or what stability is, or security. I think what I'm hoping to accomplish, being here, being able to hear what's going on and then contribute, because I think sometimes even being a person, I have my master's degree, obviously I have a stable position and work, but sometimes the lived experience isn't enough to be able to inform policy, to inform things. It's just seen as like, oh, we asked. And so I'm really excited to be able to contribute to what's happening. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Pixie. And now we have Robert.
Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Williams, out here in Humboldt County. Currently a homeless outreach worker for the city of Eureka. I work all throughout Humboldt County. Also have a part-time position working at a PSH site, one of the latest. We have 3 out here right now. We're filling up the 3rd. Was given this opportunity to work this wonderful work that I do based solely on my life experience, which really makes me able to connect with folks out here, and worked on 3 home key properties and 2 room key properties. So I've kind of seen a lot of the results of all this money that came through with COVID, which was real interesting. And as far as just happy to work with everybody, and I'm really excited to know that there's people that care about this population like myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So that rounds out the lead. We're truly so just honored and privileged to have these exceptional human beings part of this board. And thank you all for your introductions. I'm now going to hand it back over to Courtney.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you to our lead members for joining us today. And I just really want to echo what Nicole just said. We really feel so honored and privileged for all of you that accepted these positions and said yes and are willing to bring your expertise to this board, and look forward to the work ahead together in our continued partnership. Now we'll move us forward to our next slide. To support the work of the lead moving forward, we do have some discussion questions we'd like to pose to council members, which are on the screen to start the conversation. And those are, where do you see the most opportunity for impact from LEAB Insight in your own department or as a part of your work on the council? And how do you think the council can engage with the LEAB most effectively going forward? We will just open that up for discussion.
Thank you. If I can just begin us off, I know that our respective council member departments and agency, most recently I know of CDPH, who has stood up their own LEAB. So very interested in hearing from departments, all of our council member departments and agencies, so certainly those who have stood up their respective LEABs as well, and how they see the intersection.
And I posted the questions in our chat just so that we can pull down the slides and have a discussion where we can all see each other.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you very much. Just a complete appreciation for this new group and for you being willing to share your experiences with us in this space this afternoon. Just want to appreciate you all for that, and great to see the amount of interest. From my perspective to the questions, I would just say all things that where we are as a department looking to design a program, set a policy, create a funding methodology, look at data collection, like all of these things to the point made by many of the members who just introduced themselves need to be done absolutely with the guidance of those with lived experience and how we're doing it. So we do also have a number of ways in which we consult and advise in advisory committees with those with lived experience at the Department of Social Services, but very much look forward to engaging with this board and group to do just that and really look at questions that are in front of us and be with us in setting those programs and policies and designing those components. So thank you very much for this addition, and I think it enriches all of our work together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Before we proceed with hands, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief introduction of your department for the benefit of our lead members so that there's an understanding of the expertise that you're speaking from.
And I'll just do that at the end there then and say, again, the Department of Social Services is responsible for a number of programs and initiatives, but mostly related to the safety net services, concrete supports, food, cash, housing, supporting those with disabilities are from the whole lifespan. So appreciate that opportunity as well.
Councilmember Aragon, I think you guessed that I was coming to you next. I saw you go off mute.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I want to start off by saying thank you for sharing information about yourselves. I find it incredibly inspiring. So I think that alone really carries just so much weight just to hear your voice. You know, in public health. So I'm the director of the Department of Public Health, and the way that we feel that every individual across California, no matter where they are, should have access to public health services, to have the ability to have access to environments that protect and promote their health. And so we're really committed to making sure that everybody has access, including people who are homeless. And we know that that's been a challenge. So oftentimes that means us bringing public health services out to where people are living. And so we can't deliver those services without your wisdom, without your insights, and your courage. So just thank you very much for everything you're doing. And we do, even though we work at the state level, we interact with the local health departments across California. So that's always a link to us at the state level, is through your people on the ground through the local health departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Carmina?
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to start by saying, I'm Carmina from the California Department of Education. I am one of the lead consultants in the homeless education program here at the state. I'm here representing our director, Mr. William McGee. And I just wanted to say thank you to Courtney and all of your team. And again, that was a huge list of applicants, and I'm sure it wasn't easy. You did such a great job to get such a variety of members throughout the state. You know, we heard North Central, so really great representation. I just wanted to call out a couple of words that came out from some of the sharing that the lead members did. Thank you, Monique, for reminding us to honor the lived experience that you all have and what you've all been through. We've had the privilege of working with Pixie a number of times and look forward to continuing to do that with them. And Pixie mentioned, redefining what stability means. And I think that's a really key statement to make when it comes to education. I know for many of our students and their families, that definition of what stability means is often a barrier for our youth and our students and what that means under housing. So thank you, Pixie, for calling that out. I just heard so much passion and connecting to all of your lived experiences. And Melanie, thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and just valuing your story and your background. And I think no matter how much we try, we get stuck in our day-to-day work and forget the biases that we do carry around our families, students, Californians who are experiencing homelessness. So thank you for reminding all of us in this work. And I did want to offer, I will put in my chat, and any of you who are part of LEAVE and want to extend the work that you're doing beyond this state work to support us directly with any relationships with students or helping youth. And we know that that is one huge way of preventing homelessness and breaking these cycles for our families. So thank you.
Thank you, Carmina. And the LEAVE will be working to develop their priorities over the next few months. And I believe there is some interest in youth focus, and we'll also be looking at how we can coordinate with the various council member departments to submit requests for feedback and guidance from the LEAVE as well. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you to the CalICH team for such a robust search and really being thoughtful around having diverse representation, including the geographic representation. And obviously, thank you so much to the LEAD members, those who are here and those who are not, for being willing to share about some of the most vulnerable parts of your lives, past and present, as we heard. And I look forward to your insight informing the work of not only this body, but the departments that are represented on it. I am not a department head. I am one of the two community members, but I still would like to answer the question. There are so many decisions being made at the CalICH departments that either are helping to improve the lives of people that are trying to become housed, that make it more difficult, or that really don't move the needle at all. And I think that the LEAVE creates an opportunity in two different ways. One, for the departments who already are actively in the process of implementing, or well down the road of other racial equity plans. I think there's still an opportunity for the LEAVE potentially to weigh in on those policies and strategies, to provide insight to let you know whether or not they may have the impact you think they may have, which is there's often a disconnect when it comes to those types of things. And then obviously for departments that are a little bit earlier in the process or really just beginning to develop, I think there's an opportunity to run those things by the LEAVE and or even listen to them and have them inform your policy or the plans that you're developing. And I think that, I hope that you all think about this broadly. So yeah, obviously there can be narrowly focused specific programming related to racial equity, related to gender equity, related to ensuring that the experiences or the programs and policies that we're creating do what we're trying to do, which is preventing homelessness. But also, really, I think that the voice of the people with lived experience should permeate throughout every facet of your organizations. And so that's related to policies that determine how you are administering these grants, that determine how the people that you're passing or the jurisdictions that you're passing the money to are administering the grants. That relates to even some of the contract language that sometimes makes it difficult or creates unnecessary and undue burden for the people that are ultimately going to be the consumers of the opportunities that your funding is created. That looks at the resource allocation pieces, that looks at the program design. And so there's every aspect of the work that you do. I want you to be really thoughtful about how to incorporate their voices. And I know, they can only meet so much, but I'm just really hoping that we won't focus specifically only on the initiatives that are very narrow in focus, but hopefully you will start to incorporate their inputs and insights and very valuable, sometimes unfortunately hurtful experiences with the system some of our departments fund to improve it and create better experiences and obviously have better health and housing outcomes for people.
Thank you, Councilmember, for those very important insights and considerations. Anna?
Hi, Anna Acton with the Department of Rehabilitation. So we work with people with disabilities and stakeholders to advance equity for people with disabilities so they can live, work, and play where and how they choose. So in the disability rights world, there's a saying called "nothing about us without us." And that's exactly what came to mind as all of you were introducing yourself and the work of the LEAB. So I think it's really key to have people such as yourselves at the table. It's really critical in helping us make informed decisions around and policy that actually is responsive to the needs of the community. So I'm really looking forward to working with all of you, getting your input, and specific for our department with the intersection between disability and homelessness. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for your time and for being here.
Thank you, Anna. Councilmember Bass?
Hi there, it's Michelle Boss, Department of Healthcare Services, and our main program is the Medi-Cal program where we provide physical, behavioral health, long-term care, and dental services for millions of Californians, and really starting to get more and more into the health-related social needs space. Think about housing navigation and services such as that. Also want to echo the thanks to the advisory board and sharing your stories today and wanting to be part of these conversations, and to the council team for kind of the robust process in selecting our members. Earlier this year, we launched our Medi-Cal Member Advisory Committee. And so this is the first time the department has actually had a group of Medi-Cal members that are advising the state, really with the goal to listen. I think Melanie said this best. It's really only through listening to the users and kind of members of our programs are we really able to get out what we're all trying to achieve together. So Melanie, your comments really resonated with kind of what we're trying to achieve here. And I think one of the unique things with this council and this advisory board is that kind of this convening of all these departments and really everything that comes up to us about the navigation of all the different systems and programs and having departments and departmental leaders here to really all of us trying to kind of provide that ease of navigation across all of our systems and programs. I think that's a really unique opportunity for the advisory boards to really give us your best advice on how to do that and where we can learn and streamline. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember DeMorris?
Hi there, I'm Susan DeMorris. I'm the director of the California Department of Aging, and it's an absolute honor to meet all of the new advisory board members. I wanted to thank you for taking the initiative to apply and the time it took to apply and to be here today. You're already contributing. And I also wanted to just mention this is something that, at the state level, when we're looking across all 58 counties, with the 30,000 foot level, I would encourage you to really get in the weeds and give us very practical feedback from what you're hearing on the ground at the 1 foot to 100 foot level. So I heard, is it Robert? Yes, Robert mentioned, you've had experience in Humboldt County with room key and home key. So it's not just future policies that you're informing, but we may need to make modifications to existing policies. And hearing how they really work on the ground from you would be so helpful. So I look forward to learning a lot from all of you, and welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Sin?
Hi, good afternoon, council members, and welcome to our new LEAB members. My name is Lindsay Sin. I am the Secretary of the California Department of Veterans Affairs. So for the state of California, our mission is to serve and connect the nearly 1.6 million veterans with their benefits and services at all levels of government. That would be federal, state, or local government levels. We also work closely with our community-based systems of care and administer a number of benefits on behalf of veterans or directly to veterans. I appreciate you all so much as new members of this advisory council, because it's evident that not only are you still working through your own lived experiences, which is courageous alone, you're also contributing back to your communities and working to help others. So I admire your courage. I thank you for being vulnerable, being responsible to something so much bigger than yourselves. I hope that this isn't too much pressure for you all, because I think we are all so excited to learn from you and to understand what you see in particular through programs that are administered directly to folks on the ground, and learn from your lived experiences and those of your friends and families. So it takes a lot to do that. I hope you guys go home and rest today and know that, you know, we deeply appreciate your membership to this council, and that you have our full support no matter what. I hope that we have a veteran on this advisory council. If we don't, maybe there's time to add one still. But I am most interested in hearing what gaps you see in direct delivery of services from programs at the state level, even at the federal level, and how that's actually being enacted at the local level for folks. So thank you again, and thanks to our ICH staff for putting this wonderful and robust council together.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember McComber.
Hey, I'm Jeff McComber. I'm the Secretary of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and I want to welcome to the new advisory board members. We know in corrections that some of the keys to success for people releasing from our institution, whether that's probation or parole, is housing and also jobs. And so it's a critical importance to us. You know, we release probably 3,000 individuals each month back to their communities, and a percentage of those don't have homes, and it can be also we house a lot with serious mental illness or offenses that can make it challenging to get housing in certain locations. So anything we can do on our side to help support your work, we will. And again, thank you for taking advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you. We'll move it on to Councilmember Ron O'Shaughnessy.
Thank you. Hi, LEAP members. My name is Rebecca Ron O'Shaughnessy. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Services for the California Community Colleges. And we really see ourselves to really be the engine of economic recovery and growth for the state of California, to serve community members through higher education opportunities that's equitable. And in order to do that, we have to really foster the sense of unconditional belonging for our students, really address their basic needs in order to support their academic journey, and housing and is a critical piece of that. So really appreciate your perspectives, insights, and resilience that can really enrich our discussion, and making sure that the policies that we formulate aren't just theoretical, but also deeply rooted in the realities faced by our communities. And I'm confident that you will really help us really think through not just symptomatic barriers, but also systemic barriers, and also illuminating the gaps in the existing policies from a state perspective, and then emphasize really the importance of holistic solutions, right? So in addition to housing, what were the other programs that need to also be improved as part of the process to overall advance and improve the human experience. And my ask is to continue to hold us accountable, right? So as we continue to think about how we shift from output to outcome, we welcome your constructive push for us to continue to think about innovative ways to really address the experience of our citizens across our state in terms of homelessness and housing insecurity. From a community college and higher education perspective, we really will appreciate insight in thinking about the prevention piece. What can we do, right, to really end homelessness through really both crisis management, but also prevention on the front end. So thank you very much. And thank you for the council for this robust selection of the membership.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Clendon?
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Clendenin, Director for the Department of State Hospitals, and we operate the state hospitals throughout California and serve individuals with serious mental illness who are engaged in the criminal justice system. And we see that through the individuals that we serve, that often they were unhoused at the time of their arrest. And so as we work to serve those individuals in our system of care, as well as design programs that are working to try to prevent homelessness in the future and prevent the rearrest of individuals. Look forward to engaging with you all and to hear more about your experiences and how we can design our programs. And just thank you very much for sharing today your experiences, and thank you for your service. And thanks to the CalICH team for putting this tremendous board together, and we look forward to engaging with them. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will close out the discussion this afternoon with Councilmember Ward.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nancy Ward. I'm the director of the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and we work with local governments and communities to plan and prepare and respond and recover from all hazard events and disasters. And what a wonderful board this is to be able to integrate with our emergency managers at the local level, your lived experience and how we can better prepare for considerations for folks experiencing homelessness in these types of events. There is a prep group within the ICH, the Interdepartmental Emergency Response Disaster Group, and your experience will be invaluable to this effort. And I agree with everything that everyone said. Your stories are inspiring, and it's just made my day to listen to your stories today and how far you have come. And we will all be better off by integrating the board into everything that we all do. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for the discussion this afternoon, and again, thank our LEAD members for joining today. We look forward to deeper discussion and further engagement with the CalICH LEAD at future council meetings. For our council members, I will also put my contact information in the chat for you all if there is interest in submitting or working together on a specific request to our CalICH LEAD. I'll include that as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Cody.
And Cody, before you take us to the next piece, Courtney, I just want to thank you and you're the team that put this together. I think about the comments from the council members and just the appreciation for the members of the advisory board. In some ways, the word advisory board isn't always the best, right? Advice sounds like we can take it or leave it. I think you hear a real invitation to the advisory board members to really push us, hold us accountable. Rebecca used the phrase accountability. I think we both want to know the experience and how they inform our thinking about the work, but we also depend on being told how to do things differently, how to do things better, how to do things more appropriately. So it is not just advice, it's deep guidance, it's insistence, it's pushing us, because I don't know a single person who's on this commission who doesn't want to really build programs, opportunities at each level that really meets the needs of all Californians, especially those who often are overlooked and don't have the same access. And I think we heard that in some of the stories today. So I think it's an exciting move for CalICH. It's one that so many other departments and agencies and offices are pursuing as well. But how can we sort of take it to the next level and really welcome the push, the hard push, to be smarter, better, thoughtful, to get to solutions sooner? And I look forward to hearing how that plays out over the next months and years to come with our engagement and collaboration.
I'm sorry, Cody, apologies before you do continue on the agenda. With that, Dr. Galley, I will say that we're looking forward and having future agendas with standing items from both our LEAD and our advisory committees so that council feels that deeper connection. So looking forward to those opportunities. Cody.
Great. Thank you all. I really appreciate that conversation. It's so meaningful that you all were here and joined us today. And for the sake of bringing vulnerability into the conversation, I know one of the lead members mentioned being nervous. I think we all share a little bit of that nervousness here today because there is such a desire to get this work right? And we really, really appreciate your all's time and wisdom in helping push us to do that. So just a big thank you. And I'm going to transition us now to the next agenda item, which is always tough, but we're going to do that. And so, as I mentioned, we will have conversations with lead members in the future at future meetings. This is not the only time we will get to talk to them, so really looking forward to that partnership. And since this agenda item is over, we're going to change your all's roles back to attendees instead of panelists, the lead members, so that you can continue listening into the meeting. And I'm going to move us to this next agenda item, which is a review and discussion about a set of recommendations coming from our state funding and programs working group, which is focused on aligning and leveraging racial equity data. So once again, I will start out by providing very, very brief context about this working group, and then we'll pass it to two of the co-chairs of the group to lead us through discussion. So on the next slide, if you sort of think back to the diagram I showed you all earlier, the working groups, they're intended to provide input to the council and help further its priorities on work that cuts across multiple departments or agencies. The State Funding and Programs Working Group, or SFP, is a good example of this. It was created in late 2021, and it includes staff from 13 different state departments and agencies on our council that administer programs and funding related to housing and homelessness. This group's goal is to identify ways to improve coordination across state funding and programs to better serve people at risk of experiencing homelessness. In line with the council's, this is all in line with the council's action plan as well. And so on the next slide, you'll see that one of the activities assigned to the working group in the action plan is sort of as follows, It says, incorporate a focus on racial equity data, analysis, goals, including equity-related goals, and planned activities within applications for state homelessness and housing-focused funding, and analyze the data and information gathered in response. Once again, that is a mouthful. But in response to that activity, the working group looked at this and developed these recommendations that were sent to you before this meeting and that we're going to present now, all about the coordinated collection and use of racial equity data across state funding and programs, really with the hope, of advancing the state's commitment to equity, system coordination, and administrative efficiency for funding recipients. So I'll also mention that these recommendations build on current work happening with both AB 977, which requires an expanded set of programs to enter data into HMIS, as well as other national initiatives that are going on around housing, homelessness, and data collection, which we'll discuss in a minute. And so with that, I'm really excited to introduce the other two co-chairs of this group to present on these recommendations, Hana Azamati, the Deputy Director of Housing and Homelessness Division at CDSS, and Sarah Post, Policy and Program Support Chief at HCD. So Hana, I will pass it to you and you can take it away.
Thank you, Cody. Can you all hear me and see me? Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present on the work that we've been doing as part of the state funding and programs work group. So in tackling the activity that Cody described as a priority as part of the working group, we realized that as a first step, we needed to align across agencies and departments on what effective implementation of the activity actually means, so that agencies and departments can then go off to operationalize those. And that's really where we set out to develop a memo that I know you all received as part of the agenda today, to really capture what we believe are best practices and effective approaches to getting this activity and this goal right within all of our programs. We wanted to start by giving you a sense of what our process in developing this work has looked like. So in the beginning of the year, we confirmed our priorities, starting with the racial equity data priority. Then in the spring, we went through an exercise of actually looking at excerpts from our programs and funding applications across agencies and departments that were exemplary and that we wanted to learn from. We, as part of that work, compared the types and formats of questions related to racial equity data collection. In total, we looked at 10 program applications and reporting templates across 8 agencies and departments. And we noticed, what is similar and what is different across the approaches and where there were opportunities to become more consistent. And then again, rather than jumping straight to implementation, we wanted to first set a foundation to really capture what good practice would look like. And that's really where over the summer, we talked about, we discussed extensively across agencies and departments what the best practices were that we all agreed on, and then work together in capturing those as part of the memo. So the working group members all were part of shaping, having input in that process and shaping those recommendations. As well as, again, sharing examples from their own work and their own agencies as reference and to capture as case studies. And then as co-chairs, we worked with a technical assistance provider to synthesize the member input into targeted recommendations and content. And then this fall, we also spent a lot of time receiving additional feedback and input from reviewers. So for example, each working group member took the memo back to leaders and key stakeholders within their departments for feedback. And we also consulted with the Cal ICH Racial Equity Working Group to receive their feedback as well as the Cal ICH tribal grantees. And later on in this presentation, we will be asking for your input on any other stakeholders or individuals that you recommend that we get input from. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. Here's a snapshot of the program comparison exercise that I mentioned. So, for example, to better understand what are the racial and ethnic data collection approaches across departments and agencies, we looked at the actual categories of racial and ethnic identity that different agencies were using to collect data. Now, this was a quick and dirty sort of exercise to line up categories and understand how similarly or differently we were all approaching our data collection. And the purpose really of this activity was to highlight opportunities to be more consistent with our data collection. But you can see, at this, with this quick glance at this chart, that different departments and agencies are really using a lot of different language to describe the same categories. So for example, some approach Asian as a separate category, then Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian, and others combine these into one category. Another example is that some use language of American Indian while others use Native American. And then some are requesting the data as a number as opposed to a percentage. We also observed that data sources varied widely, and of course that makes it challenging to compare data when it's not apples to apples, as folks are well aware. So again, looking at a snapshot across departments and agencies really gave us a sense of how, what the variation was and what the opportunity for building it to a more consistent approach was as well. Next slide, please. So where did that lead us? So recognizing the differences in racial equity data collection and the challenges that they created, we then worked to identify foundational practices to ground the work within and across our agencies, and develop 5 recommendations, which were really our way of surfacing areas where we could all align our data equity, racial equity data practices. I'll talk through each of these in more detail, and I will be sharing examples as well. Next slide, please. So the first recommendation is adopt a public statement explaining why demographic data is collected and how it will be used at the state level. We recognize that some Californians are concerned about the potential repercussions of answering personal questions about their racial and ethnic identification. And we felt that as a first step, it was really important to message why this data is being collected. That is, it is not to harm, but to help. And specifically, the goals that we want to make sure the public is aware of, that we have in mind as we collect this information and analyze it, is that we want to be able to identify racial and ethnic disparities. We want to be able to deliver more responsive services, and we want to make progress toward reducing disparities and improving outcomes across all communities. We have an example here of what a public statement or a public message might look like. We don't expect that every agency and department adopt those exact same language and words, but we wanted to put on paper what one approach might be that captures those goals. And eventually, we hope that every housing and homelessness agency will share this message, perhaps on its website or embedded directly in program applications where the type of data is being requested for collection. Next slide, please. So the next recommendation is using consistent categories to collect data about race and ethnicity. So we referenced a lot of federal work that is happening around this topic. This recommendation is really about elevating the work that's happening at the federal level in a way. So in 2022, the Office of Management and Budget proposed new standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting federal data on race and ethnicity. And as of October 2023, HUD also confirmed these categories in the agency's latest HMIS data standards. There have been some changes, including a sort of select all that apply approach instead of a multiple races category. It includes also, this new approach also includes a MENA category for people identifying as Middle Eastern or North African. Previously, those identities were sort of bucketed together with white. And another change is Hispanic, Latino is integrated as a category of race and ethnicity, not as an additional question layered over race. So those are some of the changes that were made at the federal level. And the purpose here, again, for sharing these categories is to address the apples to oranges challenge so that agencies reporting HUD data are collecting data in consistent ways. And we'll note that we recognize that this may not be an area where we can share an exact result with non-housing agencies. So if they're not using HUD data, for example, but for organizations that do use HUD data, these shared categories and definitions create more consistency for program applicants. They also open the door for more robust analysis, making it possible to aggregate data together and be able to compare service delivery and outcomes by race, ethnicity across similar programs. So we think there's a lot of potential improvement here if we have more consistent data collection practices across providers and services, especially as aligned with this new approach that the federal government has been advising and adopting. Next slide, please. The third recommendation is to make disaggregation by race, ethnicity, and other demographic variables the norm when asking grantees to report program-level outcomes. Many agencies are already taking the approach of defining key outcomes for the programs that they administer. For example, this example that you see here from round 2 of the Home Key program defines the key outcomes of experiencing homelessness and exiting to permanent housing. Our recommendation is to disaggregate those outcomes by race and ethnicity. As a first step to reducing disparities, state and local agencies will need to understand how different demographic groups are experiencing those outcomes. And what you can see here is what it might look like if we applied the prior recommendation, which is to have more consistent racial and ethnic categories, consistent with a federal recommendation, to the Home Key program's outcome disaggregation work group. So we took the liberty of updating the Home Key current format of how they recommend disaggregating outcomes to align with our second recommendation that I just discussed. Now, one thing to note here is that we're not saying to stop at just disaggregating and analyzing race and ethnicity data. Rather, we think this is a really core and important component of how we should be analyzing outcomes. And certainly we encourage agencies and departments and providers to also disaggregate their outcomes by other demographic information like gender, sexual orientation, age, class, and zip code. We think all of that can be telling and help improve service delivery to make sure we're reaching the highest need individuals and reaching folks in an equitable way. I will now hand it off to our third co-chair, Sarah Paz, to continue with recommendation 4 and beyond. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Hannah. As Cody mentioned before, my name is Sarah Paz, and I'm Chief of the Office of Policy and Program Support in the Housing Policy Development Division at HCD. Really great to be here with you all. And I'm just going to pick up where Hannah left off and start presenting on racial equity data recommendation number 4, which is ask for qualitative data to contextualize required quantitative data. So many program applications already include narrative style free response questions. And what we're recommending is to ask for qualitative insight. This could be insights about the identified disparities, such as this program example from HIP that you see is the first example on the screen. Asking how are grantees understanding those disparities in context? How will they use program funding to address disparities and target the needs of the hardest hit communities? This could also be insights about current or future community engagement efforts, such as this example from the LADAP grant program, example number 2 on the slide. So asking questions such as, how is the grantee engaged service recipients, family members, caregivers, and other community stakeholders with lived experience? What have they heard from them, and how have they integrated their feedback? Or how will they engage community members in the future? Overall, this recommendation number 4 is an opportunity to go a level deeper to connect dots between the identified population disparities and the grantees' plans for the program or funding. Next slide, please. All right, so lastly, recommendation 5 is to resource equity efforts by investing in technical assistance and capacity building needs. So as state agencies and departments, we will need to provide the resources and support to enable our grantees to do this work, whether it's through capacity building to improve data collection, or training to translate those analytical insights into action, such as projects to address disparities in the community. We can support grantees with tools, technical assistance, and even staffing supports to build the internal capacity to do this work. For example, grantees of the CDSS Housing and Disability Advocacy Program have the ability to request funding for a list of pre-approved racial equity activities. And the agency also set aside funding for tribes and tribal entities to establish housing and homelessness programs. To support them, CDSS also invested in culturally responsive TA for tribes and tribal entities. This need to create more capacity extends to data collection as well. We recognize the challenges providers have in collecting data. It's an ongoing effort, we understand, to improve data quality, which is notoriously challenging in homelessness services, often because it's based on self-reporting. Next slide, please. So our working group has been talking about what it will look like to deliver on these recommendations. Today, we're bringing these recommendations to you as executive agency and department leaders to get your feedback and support. And our next step is for each of us as working group members to implement the work within our agencies. So we've already started to plan how we will do this internally. Each agency has provided initial input on what it might look like to operationalize these recommendations. But we want to clarify that not all of these recommendations are applicable to every agency or department, which is why you might not see every agency or department logo beside every recommendation. So the first idea is around notices of funding availability. So 6 agencies have identified ways to incorporate the language or approaches recommended in this memo to upcoming applications. HUD standards. 4 agencies will be aligning their data collection with HUD's new categories for race and ethnicity, or have already done so. Data disaggregation, 6 agencies are committed to disaggregating outcomes data within their applications or reporting templates. So the HAP program, or the Homelessness Housing Assistance Program, is a great example of this, as Cal ICH has integrated these recommendations for data disaggregation into round 5 of the program. So in the NOFA that was released in late September, the program asks for performance measures to be disaggregated by race and ethnicity. For technical assistance, 5 agencies identified opportunities to deliver TA to help grantees develop more robust racial equity data practices, and sharing with external stakeholders. 9 agencies named additional stakeholders within and outside their agencies who should be brought into this work. Next slide, please. And we're not stopping here at this recommendation memo. Hannah mentioned that we went through a process to establish 4 priorities from the action plan. And while we spent most of this year focused on a racial equity data priority, here are some of the others on our agenda that you'll see on the screen. So cross-system coordination, we're thinking about how to support greater coordination between counties, continuums of care, and other entities delivering housing and/or homelessness services. Tribal engagement, we're prioritizing tribal entities as we think about training, TA, and access to state programs and funding. Lived experience, we'd like to define guidance about how local grantees can use state funding to hire and engage people with lived experience in planning and decisions. So I imagine we'll definitely be engaging the LEAB on this one. And performance measurement. We want to support the work of defining performance measures for state-funded housing and homelessness programs. We're still working out what these activities will ultimately look like, which brings us to the next slide. So we'd really like to hear from you as senior leaders of our agencies this afternoon. So just to provide a clarification, we're not looking for a vote or any formal approval today, just your feedback and ideas to help us get closer to adopting these recommendations at a future meeting. So just asking for you to think about in this setting today, which recommendations resonate with you, which would you revise? Who else should the state funding and programs working group engage for feedback? How would you like to see the recommendations operationalized? So we've got a variety of questions for you, but without inundating you, we will ask for your feedback now. And we've got a couple of additional questions, but just wanted to get started maybe with the couple of questions that are on the slide. So anyone can jump in as you please, and just use the raise hand function, and I will be happy to call on you. Yes, Megan.
Thank you, Sarah. So just before we get started in the discussion here, you know, most recently served almost 20 years in local government, and I can't say how appreciative our jurisdictions are of us having this conversation as a collective. So really looking forward to having some inspiring conversations today that we could pass upon to our colleagues at the local level to ensure that the state family is in fact having its own conversation, ensuring that the ease of work that we're looking for the locals to do is top priority for us. So thank you again, Sarah. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Megan. Any initial reactions? Yes, Director Velasquez.
Well, thank you very much to Sarah and Hannah for this presentation and for the work. Appreciate this. This is such an important piece of work for the council to be advised on how our programs can move in a better direction overall. We've heard Dr. Gali mention before important data, like, for example, the fact that just in LA, you know, between 6 to 8% population African American, but when you talk about the homelessness population this community represents over 35% of the total homelessness population, especially on shelter population. And we know, having been in housing for so many years, the effect of where the placing of permanent supportive housing is in areas that further concentrate poverty and further concentrate people by race and ethnicity. So the fact that we are acknowledging that and ensuring that our funding programs across the state provide not just data on who we're serving and who are the beneficiaries, but really looking at outcomes. We've talked during this meeting about moving from outputs to outcomes. This is really about that. This is really about quantifying, acknowledging, but also quantifying the effect of our subsidies, our funding, state or state, federal through state, in order to ensure that we have communities that are desegregated, and the effect of those subsidies really land on the communities that are most affected and most needed. So thank you for this work. Is very important, and I'm glad to see the HCD logo and all of them. Either we're thinking or we're implementing or thinking about how to implement this recommendation. So we'll just continue to push this forward every step of the way.
Thank you, Dr. Velasquez. Councilmember Ruan O'Shaughnessy.
Thank you. Also want to very much applaud the work that's happening, and this is a very important topic. And I think I want to just touch on the performance measurement piece. I think it's really also imperative for us to move beyond kind of the mere compliance considerations and really embrace the focus on continuous improvement. So we think about the toolkit to design for purpose, thinking about usable expenditure, for example, but I think it will be really helpful to also delve into the realm of research and evidence-based practices that really engaging in removing systemic barriers, right? So then this approach, to really support all the practitioners in the field, not only doing the things that they know that work better, but also, really the combination of all the research and that's happening statewide across different realms and nationally. So then that can really support kind of the innovation that's happening at the local level. And on top of that, I definitely think that this shared goal of getting closer to data accuracy and consistency is very important. But I also want to make sure that we're not paralyzed by the pursuit of perfection, right? We know that racism stands as a primary root cause of housing insecurity and homelessness. Segregation is the reason. And so we already have enough data to get us going. We know the direction. And I think so there are a lot, I just want to really want to emphasize the urgency and say, yes, we want to perfect the data here, but that's also get the action going and start to continue to dive in, kind of looking at the racial inequity that's happening in this space, and really think about what we can start to try in terms of activities and actions to see if we're moving the needle, getting closer.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lewis.
Yes, thank you. Really excited about the direction we're moving in. Just want to uplift a couple of things and add comments. So in terms of the outcomes piece, I think that it's critically important, obviously, not just to standardize the outcomes literally about what happened, whether or not essentially there was a successful or unsuccessful outcome, for lack of a better term, but lots of the things that we're looking at that have really helped inform some of the inadvertent ways that people of color are disadvantaged is also looking at denials versus acceptances, or, and sometimes there's and I know we're talking about way down the line, but looking at who's accessing the programs and who's not. So access, looking at the length of time it's taking for people to achieve those outcomes by demographics is also another factor. And so I'm hoping that, obviously, I know this was high level, but I just wanted to lift those two things up. And obviously there's lots more, but really looking at how people either are accessing or not, and going through the respective programs is important. to look at, because that's been really revealing, especially some of the work that's been done, like on the Black People Experiencing Homelessness Committee that I'm a part of in Los Angeles. It's been telling, not just looking at the end, but looking at trying to get to the end. The other thing I want to say is that I think that I hope that rather as we look at this, another but really making sure that not only are state departments doing this, but there's really meaningful and thoughtful requirements for the respective grantees, and not just saying do this, because sometimes there's checkoff boxes and they're just looking at data, but really requiring not only certain data collection, but certain data analysis, and having some type of engagement strategy from the state departments with the grantees to ensure that if there are observations made because of the data that you require them to start collecting, then there's a next step after that, right? Not just we know that there's some challenges and inequities, but what does it take in figuring out how to create that as a systematic way of using the data? And then the last thing, similar to the comment that my colleague just made, I'm hoping that in tandem with these data standards and just thinking about it a little bit more, that as we work on our action plan, we can even incorporate, and with racial equity being one of the pieces that's a part of this council's work, really incorporate how we use the data, right? So we have the state work group working on this, but really tying this into the action plan that we're going to spend the next 6 months working on, I think is going to be critically important. Thank you.
All excellent points. Thank you so much, Councilmember Lewis. And on behalf of the working group, we wanted to say thank you as well to you and to the Vila Blossoming Bear for coming to our working group meeting representing the Racial Equity Working Group to provide your feedback for us. And I know we'll continue to engage you in the future. Councilmember Johnson.
I too want to appreciate the work of the working group here. And as everyone heard, there were some examples that we have been able to implement at social services that we're excited to learn from and continue going forward, and appreciate the recommendations that you're putting forward here. I just wanted to, especially on the data points, just double down on the need to have consistency and then have that be transparent and ability to disaggregate to really demonstrate our progress over time. I want to also just really appreciate the call out of sovereign nations and tribes in the work. And I know there's been a lot of very intentional work to have government to government consultation with tribes, and then also creating things like set-asides and programs and having various work there. I think one of the pieces that in your recommendations here are around technical assistance and support for access. And certainly we have heard from the tribes the need to have that ability to understand how to apply and access the investments, and then expectations on reporting. And I want to just say that while that is happening, and I want to make sure we can capture it too, just like we're capturing outcomes over time in terms of who's being served and how we are supporting them, but also who is providing the service. Because I do think we have probably reached a point where the amount of investment in tribes in supporting unsheltered populations is more significant than it ever has been in the past. So just want to make sure we lift that up, but also adopt that same approach for other community service providers, right? There is a kind of know-how sometimes and be able to access governmental funds. And I think that training and technical assistance that we're doing is certainly applicable to a lot of organizations who might not otherwise be engaging with government in these opportunities. So just want to make sure we can capture those outcomes on who is delivering the service, not just who's receiving it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Director Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Director Johnson. To that point, we unfortunately had a tribal nation who elected to decline a tribal HAPA word, very unfortunately, and it was due to some contract language. But they pointed to a CDSS contract for bringing families home as an opportunity for CalICH, for BCSH to mirror in a way that would make them feel comfortable. So I believe it was Councilmember Lewis earlier who said, where we engage persons with lived experience, persons with lived expertise, wherever that may be, or whatever communities they may be in, down to the way that we contract, down to the language that we use in our contracts is incredibly important. So yeah, thank you for those remarks.
Thank you. And Councilmember Aragon, I'm so sorry. I think I missed you earlier when you had your hand up.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So, Tomas Aragon, CDPH Director. Yeah, so when I put my epidemiology hat on, there's sort of two big ideas that I think about. One is focusing on how it impacts individuals. So for individuals, there's delivery service. And for delivering services, you want the most specific information on that person as possible, because that allows you to deliver the service in a way that's more human-centered, but it also allows you to count up the demand of the diversity of services. So for example, when Director Johnson mentioned issues around Native Americans, indigenous populations, you're going to have things that get missed if you do the lumping up front when you collect the data. So that's one limitation, is that you'd like to have things as specific as possible at the time of delivery. Then you roll things up. You roll things up into categories so you can draw inferences. And the inferences are going to be at the program level or at the population level, because you need denominator data if you're going to be calculating rates. And then you're sort of limited because you don't have great denominator data. But anyway, to think about those trade-offs. So, because I think oftentimes we're driven by, we want to be able to draw inferences. We want numerator data that can go above our denominators, but then you lose the specificity that the individuals need up front, and then you're going to lose those small groups that actually may need services, but it gets lost. So anyway, something to think about. The recommendations look great otherwise. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'll go to Director Marshall. You had your hand up, and then I know we're running short on time, so I was going to pass it back to Cody.
I lowered it. Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll go back to Cody.
Over to Cody.
Oh, I lost the unmute button. All right, great. Well, thank you all for that discussion and for your ideas and thoughts around this, these recommendations. The working group has worked very hard on these, and so we really appreciate it. So just the plan for you all to know, we're going to take what we heard, look at the recommendations again, do some final tweaks if we have them, and then bring them back. The plan would be to bring them back to the council for some sort of more formal adoption so that we can then think about what the process looks like to start implementing. So more to come on that. We'll go to the next slide before we transition. I just want to say a big thank you to Sarah and Hannah for being here today to present and for their work on the working group. And also just a quick shout out to all of our working group members up here on the screen who have been putting their time into this work on top of their regular day-to-day work that they are plenty busy with, as we know. So just big thanks to each and every one of you for helping us get into this nitty-gritty interagency work. So with that, I will move us to our agenda item 7. All right, so another transition, we're going to start talking about the action plan. And so we're going to talk about Cal-ICH's work to create a new strategic plan that will start in fiscal year 24-25. As you all know well by now, our current action plan ends this fiscal year, and Cal-ICH staff are overseeing a process to create a new strategic plan for the Interagency Council that can best position us to be effective in our work to prevent and end homelessness. So to set the stage for this conversation, I'll remind us quickly where we've been and sort of where we're going with this process. Let's go to the next slide, please. So at our last council meeting, we asked you all what pieces of the current plan were effective, which could be improved upon, and sort of what you wanted to see out of this process to create the new plan. One thing that we heard very loud and clear was your desire to be involved in the work to create the new plan and not just to have a finished product sort of handed to you to vote on. So to that end, we'll likely be keeping the plan as an agenda item on all future council meetings until it is done. So, you know, between meetings, we also hosted input sessions for council members and their staff to provide their thoughts on some high-level questions related to their vision for the new plan. We also spoke to the advisory committee earlier this month and asked them sort of similar questions. So we're in this sort of high-level ideating part of the process, a little still early on, but just wanted to get as much input as we can in as many different ways as we could. So today we're coming back to you with a summary of the input that we heard in all of these conversations and some specific discussion questions aimed at moving the conversation forward based on what we heard so far. And, you know, these questions are slightly more specific than the ones from the last meeting, but as you can see, we're still pretty early in the process And so in future meetings, we hope discussions will get more and more sort of tangible as we have more things to sort of look at and show to you and get your feedback on. So before we get to that discussion, we have a bit of ground to cover. So I'll jump a little bit ahead on the next slide and say that, you know, one of the main pieces of feedback that we've heard from you all in our conversations repeatedly was the need for the plan to not only be integrated with the work you are already doing, but to help provide, you know, a more strategic roadmap that pushes all of us to prioritize the most effective work we can be doing to prevent and end homelessness. This was a common thread across all of our conversations. And so to start the conversation, we have actually invited Councilmember Damaris to speak about CDA's work to prevent and end older adult homelessness within their master plan on aging. We thought this was a great opportunity to showcase how the success of CalICH as a council is dependent on the success of all of our member departments and agencies individually and vice versa, right? So CDA's work shows how we can each integrate our individual strategic plans with the overall CalICH plan to make our work even more effective sort of on all fronts. So after that, I will pass it to CalICH's action plan specialist, Nicole Sakihara, who's going to give us a summary of the highlights from the FY 22-23 action plan implementation progress report that was just released as part of the council meeting materials. These highlights are going to sort of remind us what type of information is currently being collected in our plan and how we have set it up to report back on our goals. After that, she'll go over the feedback from our various input sessions so you all can start your discussion with as much information about our prior conversations as possible. And finally, we'll move to a discussion about how to make our new plan as responsive as possible to the request for it to be strategic and actionable. So always fun to have an agenda within the agenda, but just wanted to set up that there's a few different pieces here. Oh, and one last note, we have been calling this new plan the Action Plan 24, AP 24. However, I have heard from some of you that this shorthand brings back bad memories of AP courses in high school. So we are taking ideas for catchy names for the new plan that go beyond like just indicating it as an update to the existing plan. So any ideas can be sent to me after the meeting, and there may be a prize for the best idea. No, just kidding. But on the next slide quickly before I pass it over, just going to note you all actually adopted our updated plan at the last meeting. That is now up on our website along with a bunch of materials summarizing it and discussing its objectives and everything. So just wanted to follow up. That is up there. And all of the links to the action plan should be referring to that updated version. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Director Damaris to lead us in a brief presentation.
Thank you, Cody, and thank you to the ICH staff for making the connection. I couldn't agree more that the more that our work is interrelated, the further we will all go together. So I'm going to talk for about the next 10 minutes or so about California's Master Plan for Aging and how it's been informed by our work with ICH and our partners in the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency and across the California Health and Human Services Agency. Next slide. So I wanted to start out, we held an event that you'll hear about last month in Los Angeles, and we were privileged to be able to share the work of Cal State University Northridge professor David Blumenkratz. Powerful photos and personal stories, a series that he developed. And what struck me, the three that I chose for today's slide deck, coming off of our lived experience advisory group, all three of these share in common, you know, what we are learning about older adult homelessness, where the individuals had been employed, there was a life event, possibly a divorce, a health crisis, a scam. So I wanted to share these three individuals. This is Precious's story. And we included their perspectives in our convening in Los Angeles earlier this month. Next slide. So there's an agenda within the agenda within the agenda. This is what I'm going to talk about. The context, urgency, and engagement. Next slide. So the context, since January of 2021, California has been implementing our 10-year blueprint for our state, the Master Plan for Aging, which includes 5 bold goals. This will take us out through 2021 through 2031. And goal 1 is housing for all ages and stages. But each of the 5 goals touch on housing. So it's not limited to goal 1. Certainly with Health Reimagined, we talk about mental health, behavioral health, substance use disorder. In goal 3, inclusion and equity and not isolation, we also focus on loneliness and people who are isolated in their communities. Goal 4, caregiving that works, the burden on family caregivers, unpaid friends and family, as well as the paid workforce. And in goal 5, affording aging, we talk about the inaffordability of housing, healthcare, utilities, and other items. Next slide, please. We are governed by an oversight committee. Their name is IMPACT, Implementing the Master Plan for Aging in California Together. This is our stakeholder advisory committee, and they provide an annual report, a critique of our work. And they have invited us in the last 2 years to focus, laser focus on preventing and ending older adult homelessness. And this is a quote from their most recent critique, and we can share the full document with you, but quite a bit is devoted to housing for older adults. Next slide. This is another one of Professor Blumenkratz's individuals, Stella, and the profile that was shared with us. She works 2 jobs to take care of her children, and she had a life event where she was divorced or separated from her partner, and she left the family and the household. Next slide. So in terms of the urgency, you may be familiar with this, but if not, our population statewide, nationwide, and globally is changing. So in California, you can look at these 2 graphics that show the 0 to 18-year-old population in our state is in decline, while the 60-plus population is rising. And by the year 2030, which is the out year of our 10-year master plan for aging, we'll have more than 10 million older Californians in our state. And that is why we have a master plan for aging. And that's why we're working across all 5 bold goal areas to prepare for that dramatic increase in the population. Next slide. Here's a snapshot to show you what's happening around the state. So you can see that the biggest growth areas of the older adult population, Inland Empire, Sacramento region, Orange County, San Joaquin Valley. In every part of our state, we're seeing tremendous growth, but those areas in particular are seeing dramatic growth. If you look at the Inland Empire, in 1980, 188,000 people, and by 2060, 1.4 million individuals will be 65 or older. Next slide. We heard at our last meeting from Dr. Margot Cushell, who inspires me every day with her work. And I wanted to just call out 2 specific statistics from her report. 45% of individuals who are homeless in California are age 50 or older, and 45% of single homeless adults age 50 plus became homeless for the first time at or after age 50. And these are 2 powerful statistics that we're trying to influence across agency, across government, across agencies, departments, and with our private sector partners. Next slide. We have a network of area agencies on aging throughout our state. There are 33 of them that cover all 58 counties, and we're in the midst of doing a modernization of that network. This is a quote that we received in our stakeholder work, that just one of our local area agencies on aging takes in more than 70 calls a day on housing questions, specifically about affordable housing. Next slide. you're familiar with, so in terms of data and demographics, we know that there's a housing shortage. It's something that Dr. Kushel has reported on, and she said it's as if we're playing musical chairs in our state every night with the shortfall that we have. So we know that we have 24 units available and affordable for every 100 extremely low income households in California. And our state is not alone in that challenge. Next slide. We do a lot of work with Justice and Aging. They're an excellent partner to the Master Plan for Aging. And I wanted to share, when we talk about the shortage of affordable housing for the very low income, a few statistics in our state that call out, 567,000 older adults statewide receive SSI payments. 57,000 older adults statewide interacted with the homeless response system. And 33% of older adults 65 plus in our state don't have enough income to meet their basic needs. These are the individuals that would need those very low income housing units that aren't available. Next slide. Another one of Professor Blumenkratz's individuals who was highlighted. In this case, Josu had was the victim of a scam where he was taken by a contractor and had lost $180,000. Next slide. So our engagement, in addition to the Interagency Council, there are 6 standing Master Plan for Aging stakeholder advisory committees. One of them, the Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee, really focuses on housing. They have a housing work group chaired by Marty Amoto. And that's the group that's really been driving our work on the Master Plan on all things housing, specifically on preventing and ending older adult homelessness. We held a day of action last fall to inform our next round of initiatives. We're currently in our 2-year cycle with 95 Master Plan for Aging initiatives. We had over 500 stakeholders join in person from all over the state. We had Secretary Galley and Melinda Grant from the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency were part of a panel, and they heard from stakeholders, and the issues of housing and homelessness came up repeatedly from our stakeholders. And that prompted us to work with our foundation partners. We're funders that focus on older adults in our state, helped us convene a roundtable October 3rd in Los Angeles on this topic. We know people working throughout the state that are doing excellent work, but there had not been a convening specifically on this topic. So many of you are on this call today. We had outstanding participation from federal, state, and local government, as well as our CBOs, community partners, and stakeholders. So I want to thank you all for joining in that day. Next slide. So the main focus areas that came out of that day, and we're working on finalizing that report and expect to issue it by the end of January. I'll just focus on 4 areas: tenant protections, transitions, tailoring, and targeting. And that's where, when the report comes out in January, we're going to see that these are the areas where we'll have recommendations. Next slide, please. With tenant, and there's 2 of them right there. Secretary Galley and Director Johnson participated in the day. Tenant protections, expanding rental assistance programs, including shallow rental subsidies. We heard that repeatedly, especially for the very low and low income older adults. Strengthening connections with advocacy benefits and legal resources. This is something I really want to hear from our lived experience advisory committee about how that is working and how it's not working, because we did learn about many programs and benefits that could help older adults that they're not aware of or they can't access. And then incentivizing conflict resolution and mediation support for disputes between roommates, tenants and landlords, homeowners. That was an issue that surfaced. In transitions, we know from Dr. Kuschel's work that many people become homeless for the first time during a medical transition from hospital, emergency room, nursing home transition. So how can we better align health, behavioral health, and social service providers? Next slide. Tailoring. For many older adults, work is an opportunity that's not available to them, or they might need retraining or upskilling in order to gain employment to help with their rental costs and income, to expand their income. And so that's something that we're looking at. Expanding street medicine, temporary shelters, and permanent housing supports to be better suited to individuals who need assistance with activities of daily living and who may use walkers or wheelchairs and may not be able to access two-story or units or stairwells. And then targeting. How can we urge, and this is really comes into the action plan, how can we urge local jurisdictions to prioritize older adults as a targeted population, given the demographic shift in our state? And how can we produce more age-friendly, affordable housing options and alternatives, including shared housing models? Next slide. So thank you for giving us time on the agenda. We can't wait to share the final report with you in January in advance of our next meeting. And I encourage all of you to join our listserv, where you'll get updates on all things related to the master plan for aging, as well as our work in the housing space. And again, I just want to thank every one of our public and private partners on this call today for your tremendous work and partnership. And I guess I turn it back to you, Cody, or do we take questions at the end?
Yeah, we'll have time for discussion at the end. And if there are questions, feel free to sort of put them in the chat as well so you don't forget. But just want to say something that really stuck out to me, Director Damaris, was how you were saying, the area agencies on aging were saying, like, it's all about housing, it's all about housing, it's all about housing, right? And I think we hear that from a lot of us on this council and a lot of our stakeholders. And it just struck me how all of the solutions you talked about in those slides are also things that we are working on. So I really appreciate the chance to put the interagency part of this together and demonstrate that. I'm also going to pass it to Megan to make a comment if she has one as well.
Yeah, thank you, Cody, and thank you, Director Damaris. So just on that note, Dr. Shika Wickram and I both had the opportunity to attend on behalf of CalICH at the October convening at the roundtable discussion to end and prevent homelessness for older adults. And just as a reminder for all council member departments and agencies, that CalICH is here to be an active participant in those discussions relative to your populations of specific interest. And so would welcome the opportunity, whether it's our colleagues at CDCR, our colleagues at CDPH, et cetera. And also, we're happy to be the coordinator amongst our council member departments and agencies to ensure that you have all of the colleagues that you enjoy on the council present at those respective events. And so with that, yeah, thank you, Cody. I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks. And so now I'm going to introduce our CalICH Action Plan Specialist, Nicole Sakihara, who's going to go through sort of a summary of our FY 22-23 implementation progress report and the feedback we've heard about our new plan so far. And then when she's done, we'll sort of wrap up that part and we'll move to discussion. So Nicole, you can take it away.
Thanks, Cody. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. I am very pleased to report that the Cal ICH staff, with the help of consultant Matthew Doherty, completed our fiscal year 22-23 action plan implementation progress report. I'll be doing a brief review of the report by sharing the department highlights by action area, and I will try to keep it brief so that we can get to the meat and potatoes, the action plan 2024-2025 discussion. And I will just say the highlights don't cover everything, and there is a more comprehensive list within the report. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Next slide, please. A couple of the action area one highlights include CDPH's launch of their peer ambassador program, and that currently there are 16 community-based organizations implementing that program. And through the Prison to Employment Initiative, CDCR and their partner Motherlode Job Center were able to pilot case management services for individuals who are within 1 year of release. Next slide. Action Area 2 highlights include the release of multiple rounds of encampment resolution funding. And as mentioned earlier, it was announced that an additional round of funding was open for applications. BCSH, Cal OES, Cal HHS, and the DMV went out to 5 encampments in Los Angeles and helped connect people to services and provide them access to critical documentation such as birth certificates and ID cards. Next slide, please. In Action Area 3, highlights include DHCS's new Behavioral Health Bridge Housing Program, which will help address the housing needs of some of the most vulnerable Californians experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And DHCS executed a contract with the City of Los Angeles, which will allow them to expand the number of beds in their diversion and community-based restoration program from around 500 to over 1,000 within 5 years. Next slide, please. Action Area 4 highlights include HCD's Home Key program, which produced 886 units and housed over 1,100 individuals in permanent supportive housing. And TCAC's work to award priority to projects serving people experiencing homelessness, which will see over 2,000 units created with the funding they awarded. Next slide, please. Action Area 5 highlights include the launch of CWDB's Prison to Employment 2.0 program and a pilot launched by DOR, which provides employment services to individuals with disabilities prior to their release from prison. There was a lot of work done in fiscal year 22-23 that continues through to this year, and we encourage everyone to take a look into the report to see what other departments and agencies have been doing to prevent and end homelessness in California. And we will move on to the next slide, which jumps into our Action Plan 24 discussion. So now that we've seen where we have been successful, and now we can hopefully recognize where there may be some gaps, we'll move into this next section. So far this quarter, we've been able to hold 3 input sessions with council members and their staff, as well as hold a discussion with the advisory committee at their meeting earlier this month. A brief overview of input received to date has been summarized by staff and compiled into the following themes: the ambitions, the overarching vision, the need for equity and justice, types of goals, and information useful for local partners. So some of the ambitions for the new plan included the need for department and agency cultural shifts as they develop deeper understanding of their role in preventing and ending homelessness and acknowledgement of the realities of homelessness, that there is no one type of person that experiences homelessness, and there is in fact a continuum of Californians, which will require an intersectional and unified response from the state. For overarching vision of the new plan, it's important that we view the work through the recipient's perspective, and most importantly, measure the collective progress of the council. The greatest emphasis that a lot of council members and the advisory committee put was our need to shift our focus on what we have to a commitment to what we should accomplish. And we've heard a couple of council members also touch on that today. Next slide, please. Equity and justice was a critical component throughout all of the feedback received, and it was stressed how important it would be to require a reimagining of how services and resources are delivered. That would require departments looking into their policies with an equity framework and highlighting the structural and systemic barriers to access that have historically limited BIPOC communities. Utilization of data and the analysis of that data and metrics were lifted up as important pieces of this as well. Next slide, please. While just beginning our discussions around the types of goals that we would like, some feedback received so far has included the need for departments and agencies to move toward those outcome goals, like we've heard earlier, and that those goals be person-centered, and the need to prioritize short-term versus long-term goals. And finally, in initial discussions with the advisory committee, they were able to identify relevant information for local partners, which includes housing first guidance, best ways to match services funding to housing funding, and what to realistically expect from the state and what not to expect. Were there any questions about the feedback received so far? All right, then I'll pass it back to Cody to lead us through discussion.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. So we've heard a lot of information. There was an agenda within an agenda within an agenda. So we're going to try to bring it back home to what we're doing here, right? So first of all, I just want to thank Nicole, who is the brains behind All Things Action Plan. Just really appreciate your work on all of that. And so now that we've heard about an example of how our plans can be integrated, right? How our work supports one another, what progress we made last year, how we're measuring our goals and our progress, right? And sort of what feedback we've already heard from you all directly. I want to move us into the discussion portion of this agenda item. So I'm going to say a few things to sort of help summarize and sort of maybe direct us, right? So the feedback that Nicole just read out loud is super helpful for our process. And we're going to follow up on all of those items, both with the council as well as its supporting groups. However, just want to flag, like, given how ambitious we're hearing that we all want to be with this new plan, right? Our first focus really is figuring out how we can create our planning process and design it so that it's different from how we've done action plan, like sort of more simple updates in the past. As a reminder, when we first created the action plan, we were deep in COVID response, so it was really difficult to think past the immediate needs of our stakeholders, let alone be strategic about long-term planning. In past years' planning processes, agencies and departments have mostly been focused on identifying work that they currently had underway or that they were already planning on implementing. It's been much more challenging for all of us to identify new activities or strategies or other work that we can commit to take on in the future to drive more progress on preventing and ending homelessness. And so the current action plan really serves the purpose of documenting what different agencies and departments are doing, sort of independently and collaboratively. And it provides a structure of action areas and objectives to help us communicate the state's intentions for the performance of those activities. But the current plan does not really represent an expression of really shared strategic priorities or as a roadmap for what the state will be aiming to do differently to have more impact in the future, as you all have been asking for. And so, in order to move us forward in that more strategic direction that we want to see, we sort of need to have a planning process that includes identifying and committing to new strategies and activities that embrace our vision for the plan and have measurable impacts to help us achieve our goals. So to that end, on the next slide, we have various discussion questions focused on this that we'd love to hear from you all about today. So first, right, how can the council as a whole best execute on its more ambitious vision for AP 24 in its planning efforts and in its actions? And, as examples, right, you can be like, how do we use our meetings differently? Do we meet separately or between meetings? What do we want to hear from the advisory committee or the LEAB? What other conversations do we need to be having in order to execute on this ambitious vision? The second question is, how will your department or agency identify new, more purposeful strategies that go beyond the programs or activities that are currently being implemented, right? This is more about how can council members work with their teams to pursue and achieve this vision for a new plan? What resources can we commit to engaging in this process differently? And last, what supports do council member departments and agencies need from Cal ICH staff or others to be able to identify and commit to new, bolder strategies and activities that extend beyond our current efforts and programs? So this question really being about what support do you all need to move down this path? And how can we support you as Cal ICH staff, or if we should or need to bring in others, right? So those are sort of the overview of the questions we're looking to ask. If there are other things that are coming to mind as we're having this discussion, feel free to jump in and answer the question you wish we had asked. But just want to start us there and frame the discussion around that. So I will let folks raise their hands to start the conversation if you have any thoughts about these questions, and I will also put them in the chat for us to look at. I see Megan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Cody. So just before we jump into council member discussions, just to inspire, hopefully, some conversation here, what we've had historically for our action plan has not, in fact, ended or prevented homelessness in California, right? They've really been a listing out of activities that each one of our respective departments and agencies has been responsible for. And I think each one of you have heard me say this in our council member briefings. And so would really push for participation in that second question, which is really what could we be doing? What else could we be doing, right? How else could we be pushing the framework of our respective callings to contribute to the action plan? So with that, I'll turn it back to Cody. I do see that we have some council member hands raised.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Megan. Carmina, I see your hand raised. Oh,
sorry, I didn't know which one to do first. Put my hand down or unmute.
That's great.
Just wanted to share that at the California Department of Education, there has been a lot of new things, and that is all really, really visualized and reported in the action plan. In the last year, the department has put together the Homeless Education Technical Assistance Centers that are responsible for being kind of our extra arms and hands to support county offices, who in turn support districts to provide individual support on school sites. We've expanded our trainings to ensure that there's understanding on how to identify the students, what are kind of red flags in the classroom, teachers, administrators, school counselors. We've expanded our LGBTQ resources for educators and understanding the student population. But all of that has come from the investments through ARPHCY. So I just want to be really realistic and cautious and say that initiating new activities will oftentimes mean additional investments. And I know I'm a broken record in education. We don't get housing dollars or anything like that because we don't provide housing. But I appreciate so much being a part of all the conversations. I do want to say that back to your point, Megan, and thank you for opening up, that push, that inspiration to go further. I think that we might be missing an opportunity now that we all know what everybody's doing with the initial action plan, to have some connection at that level to say, here's similarities, how do we group them, and how do we initiate that collaboration? So if you're working with veterans and some of our students have parents who are veterans or incarcerated, and that's part of their homelessness. We talk a lot about the data, and we're often serving some of the very similar populations, and we need to, at our level, make the connections for them. And maybe this action plan and everything that we've written out, we're engaging in making those connections for us and kind of forcing us to have those conversations, or having opportunities for us to have that engagement. A lot of our county office of education partners work or try to work really closely with COCs, and I know I've worked with Courtney in the past and trying to blend where's that crossover, who are those agencies, and just kind of holding each other more accountable about those connections, and you making use of that action plan, that all that work that we've done in the past.
Thank you, Carmina, for that. I really appreciate that. And I was going to say something similar, right? Where it's like, if it's not to say that there isn't new work going on necessarily, but how do we connect that work, right? How are we using the interagency? How do we make sure that your work is connected to the work that everyone else is doing, right? And so I think I really appreciate you lifting that up. Councilmember Damaris, I see your hand.
Yes. So one of the many things I love about this council is how we break down silos and we come together. And I don't think this is, I don't know that that's replicated locally. And what I saw with our convening in October is it brought people together that knew of each other or didn't. But, you know, in the case of the Aging Network, they don't necessarily, I don't want to speak for everyone, but they don't know what door to knock on, and they don't know what tables are being convened where these discussions are happening and decisions are being made. So there's a lot of community work happening, but it's limited to aging, and they show up at those tables. And so if there's any way that we can help with that cross-pollination at the local level to bring education and housing and health together locally in the community where they may not have experience doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And that is actually something that we have been thinking about internally as well, right? How do we, this is obviously a state document and it's our directing document, but how do we make it useful for our local stakeholders as well? Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations. I mean, you know, I've said this almost every meeting about actionable, tangible, measure. So I'm not gonna make that comment. I think everybody's clear about that's my hope for the next plan. But I have a question, and the response is gonna determine what my comments are. But from a process perspective, so you know, there'll be lots of inputs, and I know that you all have actively already been working to get lots of different information and feedback from a variety of groups, including some of the more formally structured groups that are tied to our council. But usually we kind of get the information and we don't necessarily have time to have robust conversations. So can you talk a little bit about process as it relates to the conversations amongst this body and what you envision that looking like? And with the input from all the different places you're getting it being incorporated in that, because I think that depending on what you say, that'll determine my comments to your bullet one, your question, bullet one.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question, and I think we're open to feedback on this, right? And I think part of the question is like, how do we use our meetings and our conversations strategically so that we can provide you with the best information possible when making decisions? You're right to point out we are seeking a lot of feedback, and a big part of this work is going to be taking that feedback, sort of summarizing it, understanding how to make it actionable or where it's actionable, right? And so if there is a way to provide that to you all that is helpful for facilitating discussion, either in these meetings or in maybe subgroup meetings or something around that nature, right? We're happy to do that, but interested in your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, just anecdotally, because I'm on the work group and some of that, I receive some of the other emails, I would imagine it's going to be feedback from hundreds and hundreds of folks. And so all I would ask is that however you all, and I can offline kind of brainstorm with you if that would be helpful, Cody and your or the team. But however you all present that information to us, I would just ask that there is ample time for us to digest it and actually have thoughtful discussions, given the amount and the volume of input I know you're going to get, and I'm sure you all will synthesize it. But I don't know that all that and then being expected to really make some decisions at the same time in that same space is going to be fruitful. So I'm hoping that this body can have, and I don't know what it looked like because I wasn't here when the original plan was created, but my request would just be that we have ample time to have discussions. And because we'll be back in person for the most part, that could be breakout groups. I don't know what that looks like in terms of the public meeting settings, but just hoping that we have time to have thoughtful engagement. The other thing I'll say, as it relates to really demonstrating, and I've made comments about this before, how all of the departments and the collective impact of all those departments are progressing along the different goals and objectives. I think that, again, although there's so many variations related to what work is being done at the respective agencies, some of it is housing specific, some of it is not. I still think that we can create some categorical North Stars and on an annual basis, I think that part of what we should be doing is figuring out how to tell the story of how the collective impact of these discussions and all the outside activities that are happening that are informed by or happening because of these discussions has shifted any of the things that we're trying to shift in the goals. And I know that sounds very complex, but I do think it's doable. And I think that that's what, as a council, we should be working towards. And so I hope that we can tease some of that out and have it clearly reflected in the plan as well. And again, I'll make myself available to help you think through what that might look like, because I understand it's a lot, but I think it's important for this council to be able to say annually at minimum, this is what we've done, because we've taken the time to figure out categorically or overarching what are the things that we can measure collectively.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lewis. I really appreciate it. And you always are helpful in all of the conversations. So I appreciate your offer. Megan, want to jump in?
I know we're running short on time, so I'll defer to Councilmember Sin. If there is time after that, I'll offer my comments.
Great.
Oh, thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. Just a quick comment on a couple of the bullets that you're asking input for. I think additional education for this council, which also benefits the public as well. I hope for those participants that attend from the public, they get something out of this. I know I learn something new every day from my fellow council members, as well as from staff. I appreciate the further discussion about presentations, not just from excellent departments like CDA and the work they're doing around the master plan on aging and addressing our unhoused aging population, but perhaps more education and information coming from folks on the ground who are dealing every day with getting unhoused individuals connected with services, and more about the barriers that they're seeing that we can resolve, maybe from a policy standpoint, and just to provide better education for all of us. I think that would be really ideal, and I would love the council's help with that. I also think it would be continuously beneficial for us to meet in person. So I really look forward to us getting back together and kind of going back to Councilmember Lewis's comments, having the opportunity to engage either through additional working groups or in additional forums, so that we are really collectively working together to kind of set those metrics statewide, and just additionally connecting with folks on the ground and folks who are kind of below the the state policy level, so that we really understand the kind of the true issues and the true solutions that we need to help implement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Does anyone else have any thoughts about, oh yeah, Director Johnson, I see your hand.
I appreciate all the comments that were made, and I would just add to the points that were and amplify the points that were made around the value add is the interagency, it's the collaborative, it's the collective. That's the value add. The departments and others are doing things in the community, et cetera, but that is the value add. So I just would just say to the points around both Councilmember Lewis's point around being able to demonstrate outcomes and collective impact, I'd also just say we should streamline and prioritize. Because if we prioritize and we are collectively prioritizing using the voices of the lived experience that are bringing up what is kind of the most critical priorities for them, and we do that, I think we can see that in a very different way than having many goals and objectives that then it's a little harder to show how each of us is contributing and actually engaging in those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Anna, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Director Johnson. It just to build off of that, I think by streamlining and prioritizing, one of the most difficult pieces for individuals is accessing, navigating, right, across all of our different services and funding sources. And so, I think there's ways through that to simplify it for people, help people navigate it. And to Director Damaris's points, I think that, all that magic happens at the local level for the individual when they're trying to get the access when they need it to the services to either prevent homelessness or to get, into shelter. So the more we can do to support those local level to do that cross coordination, to streamline access, to help people navigate the systems, it leverages all of our resources more effectively, right? And gets it to the people who need it the most and when they need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Cody, I have just one overarching comment listening to the feedback. One of the things with prior iterations of the action plan, and Megan, you said it, to date, the action plan hasn't ended homelessness. I mean, I know that's a huge task, but we should, in the vein of prioritization and focusing a bit, think we should have a pretty high bar for what gets on the action plan, that we're pretty clear about how our focus and achievement in that area is going to lead materially to ending homelessness. Because sometimes you can easily get overwhelmed by the laundry list of really important things that departments, even across departments and agency, are happening, but without an explicit connection to how it delivers on the outcomes that Veronica was highlighting and the streamlining and prioritization that Kim and Anna were describing. I think there's a real opportunity to have it be a plan with high standards, that the elements that we lift up and put on the plan do have a clear connection to the broad goal of ending homelessness.
Yeah, that's
Thank you,
really,
Dr. Galley.
yeah.
I will just say, having been a director of public health for a local county public health agency for the duration of COVID, couldn't agree with you more. I mean, our local departments truly are the ones who are bearing the brunt of the work that we are all hoping to accomplish. The better coordinated that we can be at the state level, the better coordinated our jurisdictions can be, our partners at the local level can be. And so how important is the work that we do here, that you all do here at the council level? So with respect to that, I'll turn it back to Cody and thank you. Thank you for the time.
Great. All right, well, we're going to take all that. Thank you all. If you have more thoughts, feel free to send them to us. And we will keep talking about this. So let's bring the slides back up. I just have one thing to close us out on the next slide. So these are really helpful thoughts. This is also obviously just a starting place for all of us to engage in this planning process differently. So we sort of have two requests on that front, right? The first request is that, and we'll follow up with you after to get the answers to these questions, so not just to start thinking about them now, right? We really are hoping that we can identify sort of the proper staff person in each of your departments and agencies to work with going forward on questions or planning related to the action plan, right? These folks can have high-level perspectives on your department or agency's work and be able to sort of fully engage in planning conversations and decision-making with your input. This will really help us just like move work forward between meetings and make sure that we're on the same page and have some information flow, right? The second is we really want to make sure the planning process is inclusive of all of your stakeholders, because our plan really should reflect the needs of all of the people that we serve, individually and collectively. So to that end, we are asking that all of you can identify sort of stakeholder groups that you engage with in this input process. This can be through existing structures or new engagement processes, and CalICH staff can help with this engagement, but just really need help in identifying the best venues for that. We already have a few folks who have directed us to different summits that are happening or different monthly or quarterly meetings that happen. So that's always super helpful. And to Veronica's point, there will be a lot of people engaged in feedback. But yeah, so we'll follow up with you after the meeting for your responses to these things, but just wanted to start the thinking on that. And then on the next slide, I will just wrap up by going over some of our next steps. So as the next steps in the development of this new strategic plan, we're going to incorporate all the feedback that we've heard into our planning process and our proposed structure for the new plan. We're going to introduce this process to members of our LEAB and get their input on specific parts of the strategic planning process. We're going to discuss sort of potential measures to include in the plan with our advisory committee. And at the next council meeting in February, we do hope to bring you sort of a proposed structure and maybe set of goals to think about, to provide feedback on, to workshop, right? So that we're getting more and more tangible and are using that feedback that we're hearing as basis for those ideas. So with that, I will end this conversation now. Really appreciate you all heard a lot of information. You synthesized a lot of information. You provide a lot of feedback. So just appreciate you all and your patience and thoughtfulness with that. So I'm going to pass it to Claire to facilitate our next agenda item.
Thanks, Cody, and thanks, everyone. So we will now accept general public comments. Thank you for your patience, and we appreciate the council members for listening to public comments as well. We welcome all public comments and feedback. I would like to remind everyone that we are unable to discuss items that are not on the agenda for today's meeting. Additionally, due to the structure of this public meeting, we will not be able to respond to any questions. If you have any questions for CalICH or the council, the best way is to email us at calich@bcsh.ca.gov. We received public comment before the meeting, and it was provided to the council members in advance of this meeting and is available to the public upon request. So everyone will get 2 minutes for their comments. CalICH staff member will soon share their screen with a 2-minute countdown timer, and I will warn you when your time has expired. If you are connected through Zoom, please select the raised hand icon in your meeting window on your computer, and I will unmute you and allow comment when I call on you. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. And once I call on you to speak, you will be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself. So I will now be moving over to see hands raised, and I will call on people one at a time.
Claire, if you can just give me a moment, I just wanted to note that Dr. Galley, Co-Chair Galley, had to leave the meeting, so he is no longer with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, so the first hand I see is Rich Lynn. So I will be allowing you to talk. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Hey, thanks for meeting. And I just want to be as brief as I can. I am a private citizen. I have a concern about homelessness in our area. And what I've done is I put together a program where I adopted a couple people and I made sure I stayed in touch with them to get them off the street. One gentleman that I met, his name is Roy. The first time I met him, he said his goal is to die. And I said, well, that ain't gonna work. So I got my partner and she came over and she has just a softer approach. And we got him moved on to a facility where he's being taken care of. We have another gentleman in the city where I live, Rio Vista, where he was on the street. We got him off the street too. What I know of, the recidivism for our work for helping the homeless is basically 10% from getting them off the street and back into civilization where they're, a productive member. And I would say it's imperative that we remember that we actually have to go out and work with people, get to know who they are. In my case, adopting them. And that doesn't mean taking them home or anything. That just means making sure they understand that the service that you're bringing to them or telling them about is real. Help is real. and they can move to getting back because they really can't trust the system based on the past, failings that we've had. So I would encourage everybody to consider adopting someone and getting to know them. That way, you know exactly what their situation is and the best way to guide them into services so they can trust the system again. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. The next hand I see is Kathleen Crowley. I will be allowing you to talk.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Kathleen Crowley, Executive Director of Procovery Institute here in Los Angeles. And I appreciate the work you're all doing. I appreciate all the community members. I feel like you all seem very invested and I sense your urgency. I know this was discussed in today's meeting, but I would recommend that you ask LEAD committee members the questions that you asked today, where they feel they'll have the most impact and how they feel they can be engaged most effectively. And I would love it if they would create a collaborative report back on what they feel the system is doing well, what's working, where they feel it isn't working, and what recommendations they have. I also hope that it will be baked into their role, that they won't just lift up the voices of unhoused people, but they will provide access to unhoused people, including by facilitating maybe events across the state, listening sessions with unhoused people so that they have access, because there's a lot of talk about giving the unhoused people not having a voice, but they have voices, they don't have access. Also, I'm hoping there was reference today to reimbursement for LEAD members. I hope that there will be compensation, not just reimbursement, but actual compensation as you value any consultant's time and expertise. And I think there was one more thing. Actually, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for all your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, the next name I see is Noah. So Noah Whitaker, I'm going to be allowing you to talk.
Good evening. Thank you, Cal ICH members. I'm Noah Whitaker. I'm a homeless initiative program coordinator in the county of Tulare. I applaud the council for welcoming the master plan on aging conversation today. And it actually made me think quite a lot about other master plans or strategic plans that are driven from the state's efforts, and an awareness that in just over a year, the state's suicide prevention strategic plan is also coming up. And I know in our local community, we've lost more than 8 unhoused neighbors in a fairly short period of time to suicide deaths with the method being rail. So that is an opportunity also, I think, to connect not only on that strategic plan, but with other state-based agencies and national ones, such as the Rail Authority, but really folding in this opportunity to insert and collaborate with these different strategic plans to share elements as elements of suicide prevention, older adults and such also belong in our local homeless strategic plans. So it would be nice to see that alignment at the state level because a lot of county-based organizations tend to operate focused on their independent strategic plans. And the more that that can be interwoven at the state level, the more that that impact will be felt, I believe, at the local level, as then it gets implemented through local strategic plans and therefore local policies and actions. So that's really kind of my comment for today. And thank you again for the excellent work and for helping to provide an example to local governments as to the importance of working across branches, agencies, and with other partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. I will be moving on to the next individual who is a listed phone number. So if you feel comfortable, please state your name when I allow you to talk.
Hi, this is Ruth. I'm an unhoused person. I'm outside. I live outside. I'm making my comment. I'm with some other unhoused people that were in an encampment resolution fund motel. They got kicked out or evicted, or the program ended, and they were transported back to my outdoor home in a van with a bunch of trash bags full of people's stuff. So this is how the encampment resolution fund panned out over 6 months. I got a bunch of stuff and people at my spot. And I just wanted that to be very clear, because I know there's a lot of investment into these encampment resolution funds. Why not homeless resolution funds? Like we have our homelessness resolved when we're in housing, right? Like when we're actually housed, not when we're in quote unquote homeless housing. And that would resolve the encampments too, like actually sustainably, like permanently resolved. And a lot of us didn't get in the motels, and now our stability is being threatened by these new arrivals and this chaos. And I just wanted you to know that this is over about 6 months that they were picked up and then dropped back off. And yeah, so I'm trying to get some homeless people that were kicked out. I'm trying to get them Obama phones so that they can be involved in these meetings. They're very interested and they really want their voices heard. My email address is roofless, ROOFLESS, Ruth, RUTH @gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. All right. Ludmilla, you'll be next.
Hello. Okay. Incredible meeting. Thank you so much for all the input everybody gave and the amazing things each person is doing. I wanted to say I'm so glad on the immediate level that emergency services is meeting to discuss disaster response for homeless people. I do want to say a big item is that the activation standards right now in some areas are, if the temperature is going to be below 32 for 3 days in a row or more, that's not adequate. Good for preventing frostbite, but a much more humane and workable standard would be looking at hypothermia levels and activating prior to those being in the environment. Okay. Just looking at new purposeful strategies, one thing that would be really wonderful to have is places with an affordable buy-in. For example, about $300 a month, maybe $400 including utilities, and hourly work or stipends also for those who can contribute to the community. That would really help the working population, those who are priced out of the market rate rents. And so it would also very much help those who are aging, disabled, or the student population. There's a problem with the current system where sometimes permanent supportive housing and even temporary locations are accessible only through interventions. This is problematic because it disincentivizes personal resilience and incremental healing. And finally, I'm just going to say that sooner or later, I would love to see us align with United Nations sustainability goals. Build our housing using renewable materials, urban planning, including green space, employing people who are coming out of homelessness with environmental projects, and otherwise incorporating sustainability in what we're doing going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ludmilla. Okay, and I see a hand for Jerry Lalonde-Berg. I'll be allowing you to talk.
Thank you very much. It is incredibly powerful to follow the last two speakers, Ludmilla and Ruth both. What you said was very meaningful, and I would appreciate the council listening to what you had to say. The two main points I want to make today is first that shared housing is about 20% of the solution. That's my guess. Ms. Damaris mentioned that in her presentation, and particularly for the elders, the concepts of shared housing and community housing into the master plan, but even into homelessness, like they're doing here in Sonoma County with Share Sonoma County, has real real potential. So I'd ask that it's not mentioned in the report that from today, so I would hope you would add that into your report. My second major request would be that the council conduct some kind of a study or commission a study or just publish what you can find about the continuum of care. How are the continuum of cares doing in California? I've heard very good things about the Sacramento continuum of care. What are their problems? What are their governance issues? All of those kind of things. I think Cal ICH, it would be a very nice forum to pull together what they give us in their strengths and what additional resources they could help to guide us to. And finally, thank you all. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I see the quality of what you're doing.
Thank you very much for your comment, Jerry. I see no more hands raised, so I will be moving on. So thank you for all of your public comments. The council staff and I will take these suggestions into consideration for future Cal ICH meetings and in our work. Now I will turn it over to Cody to facilitate final remarks.
Great, thank you, Claire, and thank you to everyone who made public comment. We really appreciate you listening to the meeting and your thoughts on what we discussed. So I am actually just going to pass it to Acting Secretary Igawa for any final remarks he may have, and then we'll pass it to Megan Marshall for a closeout.
Thanks. Thanks, Cody. Well, given my promotion to the chair of the council, my recent promotion, my final remarks really is just a series of thank yous. So first, I'd like to thank Megan and the Cal ICH staff for their work to organize and convene this meeting. Secondly, I'd like to thank the LEAB members for their time and commitment, and also thank Homebase for their support of the LEAB members. I'd like to thank the state funding group for their recommendations, and also thank Susan for her presentation on the master plan on aging, and thank the Cal ICH staff for their work on the next action plan. And finally, I'd like to thank all of the council members for their active engagement and continued partnership. And I'd like to say that I am looking forward to supporting the incoming BCSH secretary as the co-chair of the council. So I think those are all of my remarks. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And then Megan, we'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Cody, and thank you, Tad. For those of you who do not know, Mr. Igawa is our agency general counsel. So we're very appreciative of his stepping in as the role of acting secretary, but certainly for his ongoing role of general counsel for agencies. So thank you, Tad, for being here with us today and being so interested in the work that we're all hoping to accomplish. So just hoping to revisit some of my earlier remarks and opening comments. You know, it is winter time, and California is a very large state. We have folks who are in 10 feet of snow right now. We have folks who are having landslides. And so, you know, especially for our folks who are unhoused, those experiences are more tremendous. And so the work of this council really hopes to inform the services that our local jurisdictions are responsible for administering to getting out to our persons who are experiencing homelessness. So with that, I would just thank the council for its work and its continued commitment to the work that we hope to accomplish. Most excitingly, I would say, in the year of 24-25. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Cody and Claire, to close out this council meeting.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all again. Thanks to our council members for your insights and comments during our meeting today. You know, as you can see, we're working hard to move the council toward actionable work and are able to do so only because of your thoughtful input and attention. So our next council meeting will be on February 28th at 1 p.m. I also want to thank the members of the public who attended this meeting. We appreciate your interest in our work around homelessness, and I know many of you who attend our meetings also are working to address homelessness, and we just appreciate all of your efforts. So we hope you listen in to our advisory committee meeting as well on February 5th at 1 p.m. And with that, our meeting is adjourned at 4:06 p.m. To receive up-to-date information on the council's activities, please sign up on the council's email list. There's a sign up option on the council's webpage. We also encourage you to follow up Cal ICH on all of our social media platforms listed here. So thank you all for your time, and we will speak to you soon.